"Go back to your garage, little girl. This ain't your fight." That was the last thing he said before he hit the ground. Seconds. That's all it took. 6 men, 1 chain, and a 24-year-old blonde mechanic with grease still under her fingernails who decided on a cold Colorado highway that walking away was the one thing she absolutely could not do. Nobody in Red Creek saw it coming. Nobody believed she had it in her. Until the night she proved every single one of them wrong. If this story moves you, subscribe to this channel, follow along until the very end, and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The last customer of the night rolled his bike into Iron Road Motorcycle Garage at 8:47 on a Tuesday, and Samantha Reed didn't even look up from the carburetor she was rebuilding. She heard the engine before she saw the headlight. She knew by sound, always by sound, that it was a '74 Harley Shovelhead, the exhaust note a little too ragged on the left cylinder, a little too rich on the fuel mix. She had diagnosed the problem before the man even killed the engine. "She's running lean on the right and flooding on the left," Samantha said flatly, still not looking up. Whoever tuned this last didn't know what they were doing. The man who climbed off the bike was somewhere in his late 40s, big arms, a faded denim vest with patches she didn't read, and the particular kind of exhaustion on his face that comes from too many miles and not enough sleep. "Billy Crane sent me," the man said. Samantha finally looked up. Billy Crane was a mechanic 3 towns over who had stopped sending people to Iron Road the day Samantha took over the shop after her father died. He had sent exactly 0 referrals in 14 months. Now he was sending someone on a Tuesday night at 8:45. That meant one of 2 things. Either the bike was so far gone that Billy didn't want the headache, or Billy owed this man a favor and didn't want the liability. Samantha wiped her hands on her rag, walked over, crouched down beside the bike, and looked at the engine the way most people look at a face they're trying to read. "You need it tonight?" she asked. "I need it by morning," the man said. She looked at him. "That's a 6-hour job if everything goes right." "Does everything usually go right?" "No," she said. "I usually finish anyway." He almost smiled. "What's your name?" "Samantha Reed. My dad built this place." "Your dad's still around?" Stood back up. "No, he's not." A beat of silence. The man nodded once, the kind of nod that says, "I understand more than you're telling me, and I won't ask again." "I'll be back at 6, he said, and turned to leave. "You didn't tell me your name," she said. He paused at the door. "Need to. Just fix the bike." She watched him go. Then she turned back to the shovelhead, crouched down again, and started working. That was the kind of night it was. Ordinary, invisible. Exactly the kind of night that never ends up meaning anything. Except that one did. Samantha had been running Iron Road for 14 months and 3 weeks. She knew the exact number because she had been counting, not proudly, not sadly, just practically the way you count the days when you're not entirely sure you're going to make it. Her father, Douglas Reed, had built the shop with his own hands when Samantha was 4 years old. She had grown up under the lift, learned to read by sounding out part numbers, fallen asleep in the back office more nights than she could count. She knew every inch of that building, the way most people know the house they grew up in, not because she memorized it, but because it was inside her. When Douglas died 18 months ago, cardiac arrest, no warning, no second chance, he left her the shop, the tools, $12,000 in outstanding invoices, and a reputation that technically belonged to him. Because people in Red Creek had known Douglas Reed, they did not know his daughter. What they knew, what they thought they knew, was that she was young, female, and therefore, by the particular logic of a certain kind of person, a certain kind of small Colorado town, probably not someone you trusted with your motorcycle. She had heard it all, loudly, directly, without any apparent shame on the part of the people saying it. "No offense, sweetheart, but I'd rather wait for someone with more experience. Your dad was the best mechanic in the county. You're not your dad. I'll just take it to Billy Crane. No hard feelings." She never argued. She had learned very early that arguing about whether you were capable was the least efficient way to prove you were capable. Either worked or it didn't. The engine either ran or it didn't. The bike either left the garage better than it arrived or it didn't. She worked. Every night, sometimes past midnight, she learned things her father hadn't taught her. Fixed problems she'd never seen before. Built a knowledge in her hands and her instincts that had nothing to do with gender and everything to do with 10,000 hours of refusing to stop. 14 months in, Iron Road was still barely surviving. She had 3 loyal customers, maybe 4, on a good week. The town still talked about Douglas Reed like he was a saint and looked at Samantha like she was a temporary inconvenience. Her mentor, Raymond Carter, was the only person who said it plainly. Raymond was 63 years old and had been fixing bikes since before Samantha was born. He had worked alongside Douglas for 11 years and had stayed on after the funeral out of loyalty and stubbornness in equal measure. He came in 3 days a week, drank the worst coffee Samantha could make, and told her the truth when nobody else would. On the Wednesday before the night at Red Creek Highway, Raymond sat on the old metal stool by the parts shelf and watched her rebuild a clutch assembly with the particular silence of a man who had something to say and was deciding how to say it. "You know what your problem is?" he finally said. Samantha didn't look up. "Which one? The main one." "My bank account? No." He took a sip of the terrible coffee. "You're too quiet." She actually stopped what she was doing, looked at him. "You're telling me I need to be louder?" "I'm telling you that this town doesn't see you," Raymond said. "Not because you're not good enough, because you don't let them see you. You do the work, and you go home and you don't make anybody uncomfortable with the fact that you're better at this than most of the men who walk through that door. I'm not better than. You fixed a 67 panhead last month in 4 hours that Billy Crane had told the owner was a 2-day job," Raymond said. "You diagnosed the problem on that man's bike tonight, in 30 seconds from 20 feet away. You're better, Samantha. And the fact that you won't say so is the same thing as agreeing with the people who say you're not." She didn't answer that. She went back to the clutch assembly and watched her work. After a while, he said, "Your father wasn't quiet." "My father was a man," she said, without bitterness, just fact. "Different." Raymond put down his coffee. "Yeah," he said quietly. "That's the problem. He left at 9. She kept working until 1 in the morning. The shovel head was done by 5:15, an hour and 45 minutes before the man came back to get it. She didn't sleep. She sat in the back office with her father's old coffee mug and thought about what Raymond had said. She thought about it for a long time. 3 towns east of Red Creek, in a motor lodge off Highway 62, William Dawson sat on the edge of a bed that was too soft and a room that smelled like other people's regrets. And he talked to his motorcycle through the window. He did this sometimes. It was not something he would ever explain to anyone, and he was aware that it made him sound like the kind of old man people worried about. The bike, a 1969 Harley-Davidson XLCH Sportster, cherry red, rebuilt from the frame up over the course of 3 years in a garage in Nevada, was the most honest thing he owned. It didn't pretend to be something it wasn't. It broke when it was broken, and ran when it ran, and there was a purity to that which he had stopped finding in people a long time ago. "Not much farther," he said to it. "Arizona by the weekend if the weather holds." Naturally, said nothing back. William Dawson was 61 years old. He had gray at his temples and a scar on his chin from a fight in Bakersfield in 9,987 that he no longer told the story of. He had large hands that were slightly too scarred to be called merely weathered, and he moved with the particular deliberateness of a man who had once moved very fast and had decided, after some serious consequences, that speed was overrated. He had been a member of the Hells Angels for 19 years. He had left the club on good terms, better terms than most, and he had spent the 6 years since then in a kind of quiet that he found either peaceful or lonely, depending on the day and the hour. He had a daughter in Flagstaff he was going to visit. That was the whole of it. A 6-day ride across Colorado and New Mexico, a knock on a door he wasn't sure would open, and whatever came after. Simple, quiet, ordinary. He was very tired of things not being ordinary. He picked up the local paper that the night clerk had left under his door, the actual physical paper, because William Dawson did not own a smartphone and considered this a reasonable life choice, and read the front page without much interest. Creek County Fair, Water Board meeting. A piece about gas prices he already knew was going to make him angry. To page 3. There was a small photograph of a woman at what appeared to be a motorcycle repair shop. Caption read, "Iron Road Garage, can Douglas Reed's daughter keep the legacy alive?" William looked at the photograph for a moment. Young woman, on her hands. The particular expression of someone who has been asked a question they are tired of answering. He turned the page. Was. The next day, he took the long road west on Highway 62, the way he always did when he had the time and the inclination, and he stopped for fuel at a gas station outside Red Creek just as the sun was beginning to drop behind the mountains. It was when he saw the truck, 3 men in it, sitting still, engine running, watching him the way that a certain kind of man watches a certain kind of situation, calculating, patient, already decided about something. He filled his tank and didn't look at them directly. Things in 19 years. One of them was how to take inventory without making it obvious you were doing so. 3 in the truck. 2 more leaning against the far wall of the station, pretending to look at their phones. That was 5. He paid for his fuel in cash the way he always did and got back on the bike. He made it approximately 2 miles down the road before the truck appeared behind him. By the time Samantha was locking up the garage at 10:17 that same night, she was thinking about money. Specifically, she was thinking about the $1,400 she didn't have that the landlord wanted by the 15th. Specifically, she was thinking about whether the job she had quoted on the Touring Electra Glide coming in Thursday would be enough to cover it, and whether she could push the parts supplier another week on the invoice she already owed him. She killed the lights in the bay, picked up her repair bag from the workbench, checked that the door was locked, the way she always did, once with the key and once with her hand on the handle, parked on the side lot. The drive home was 12 minutes. She had half a sandwich in the refrigerator at home and a decision to make about whether she was too tired to be hungry or too hungry to be tired. She pulled out of the lot and turned onto Red Creek Highway. It was when she heard it. Not a crash, not a shot, just shouting male, multiple voices, and the particular register of voices that were not arguing but performing. Voices that were loud because they wanted someone to know they were loud. She saw the lights first, the truck, and then as she came around the slight curve in the highway, the gas station, the old abandoned one that had been closed for 3 years, the one with the roof that had been slowly falling in on one side. She saw 5 men, then 6. She saw someone on the ground. She almost didn't stop. She would think about that later, the almost. The 2.5 seconds where her foot stayed on the gas, and her brain offered her a perfectly rational argument for why this was not her problem and why stopping was dangerous, and how the smart thing, the safe thing, was to call 911 from the road and keep driving. 2.5 seconds. And then she heard her father's voice, not in any mystical way, not in any way she could explain, just the memory of his voice, saying the same thing he had said to her when she was 11 years old, and there was a boy at school being surrounded by older kids, and she had looked away. If you see someone standing alone against the world, Samantha, you be the person who stops. She stopped the truck. She sat there for 1 more second, engine running, hands on the wheel, looking at the scene through the windshield. 6 men, 1 of them on the ground. A motorcycle cherry red parked at an angle 10 feet from the group like it had been abandoned mid-flight. She was a 24-year-old woman. She weighed 138 pounds on a heavy day. She did not own a firearm. She had taken a self-defense class once 4 years ago for 3 weeks before she dropped out because the shop needed her. She had was her repair bag. And in her repair bag, because she always carried one, because on a long road you never knew when you might need to tow a bike to safety, was a length of heavy gauge motorcycle chain. Not a weapon, a tool. 3 feet of hardened steel links that weighed about 6 pounds and could, depending on how you used it, change the physics of a situation considerably. She reached into the bag without thinking about it. Hand found the chain, the way her hand always found the right tool, not by looking, but by knowing. She got out of the truck. Later, much later, when people asked her what she was thinking as she walked towards 6 men who were currently standing over a man on the ground, she would say, "I wasn't thinking about me at all." That was the truest thing she could tell them, even if she understood why it sounded impossible. She was thinking about was the angle. The 6 men were grouped in a rough semicircle. 4 of them were focused on the man on the ground. 2 of them, the 2 at the outer edges, were the ones who would turn first when they heard her. She needed those 2 neutralized before the other 4 could respond, because 4-1 was survivable and 6-1 was not. She was thinking about weight distribution, about how a large man who is leaning forward is already unbalanced and requires very little force applied in the right direction to go down. She was thinking about the chain in her hand, not swinging it, because swinging it was slow and telegraphed, but using its weight, its momentum, its length as a way to extend her reach and change the geometry of the space. She was 20 feet away when the first one saw her. He was the larger of the two on the outer edge, maybe 6'2", thick through the shoulders, the kind of physical confidence that came from never having met anyone willing to push back. He looked at her with genuine confusion first, then amusement. "Hell are you?" he said. "I'm the mechanic," Samantha said, and she kept walking. He laughed, actually laughed, and turned his head to share the joke with the man next to him. Hey, look at this. Little girl mechanic thinks she's gonna mind." The second his weight shifted onto his right foot and his head turned away, Samantha moved, not toward him, to the side of him. She understood something that most people who don't study engines and physics don't naturally understand. Force applied obliquely is more efficient than force applied directly. You don't push a stuck bolt from the front. You break it loose from the side. The chain wasn't a weapon in the traditional sense. It was a lever. The first man was on the ground before he finished his sentence. Not because she was stronger than him, she wasn't, not even close, but because his own momentum, with a precisely placed low strike to the outer side of his right knee, had redirected all of that size and weight and confidence directly into the asphalt. He went down hard. The sound was enough, that solid, undeniable sound of a large man hitting pavement, and the immediate total silence of 6 people simultaneously recalculating what was happening. In that silence, which lasted maybe 1.5 seconds, Samantha had already moved to the second man on the outer edge. He was faster. He actually grabbed for her arm. His hand closed on her jacket sleeve. She let him pull. She let him pull. She used his pull against him, the way she used everything as information, as energy, as something that was already moving in a direction she could redirect. His pull brought her inside his reach, where a man's size becomes a disadvantage because there's no room to swing. She was under his arms before he understood what was happening. The chain swung short and close, hit the back of his knee. 4 men left, and now William Dawson was rising. She heard him. Before she saw him, the grunt of a man who has been knocked down and is getting up anyway, the particular support of a body ignoring the signals it's receiving because the mind has already made a decision. She didn't look at him. Looking at him was a luxury she didn't have. The remaining 4 had reorganized. 2 of them moved toward her. 2 stayed uncertainly, watching the older man pull himself upright. The one who came at her first was smarter, faster, more cautious. He didn't lunge. He circled. He was thinking, which made him more dangerous than the first 2, but also made him slower because thinking takes time. "On it down," he said, looking at the chain. "You're going to get hurt." "I'm going to get hurt," Samantha said. He moved. She sidestepped, not backwards, sideways, into his trajectory, so his swing passed behind her. And he was. The chain caught his wrist on the follow-through, not hard enough to break anything, hard enough to make the rest of the night very uncomfortable for that hand. He yelled. Behind her, she heard William Dawson's voice for the first time. "On your left." She didn't question it. She moved left. The man who had been coming at her from behind walked into empty space, off balance, and she helped him finish the fall with a precise shove to the shoulder. That was 5. And then there was a moment, a real moment, not the kind you invent afterward, but the kind that actually happens, where the 6th man stood still and looked at her, looked at the 4 men on the ground, looked at William Dawson standing upright behind her, looked at the chain in her hand. He looked at all of that for a long time. Then he helped up the man nearest to him, the first one who had gone down, and they walked to the truck without a word. The other 3 followed. No speeches, no threats, just the sound of truck doors closing and tires on gravel. 8 seconds had passed since her first strike. She knew because afterward, standing alone in the silence of the abandoned gas station with William Dawson beside her, and 5 empty spaces where 6 men had stood, she played it back. 8 seconds. William Dawson sat back down, not because he wanted to, but because his legs decided it before he did. He sat on the low concrete wall at the edge of the parking area and breathed. Samantha stayed standing. Her hands were still, but her heart was not. He looked up at her, the particular look of a man who has seen things and knows what he has just seen. "The mechanic," he said. "I told you that. I thought you meant it as a..." He stopped. "I didn't believe you. Most people don't." He was quiet for a moment. He looked at his hands. Then he looked at the cherry red Sportster, parked 15 feet away, still on its kickstand, apparently undamaged. That's a 69 XLCH, Samantha said. He looked at her. Yeah. The way it was sitting when I pulled up, they didn't tip it over. That tells me whatever they wanted the bike intact, which means they were going to take it. William blinked at her. You were assessing the situation while you were... I always assess the situation. A long pause. What's your name, he asked. Samantha Reed. My dad built Iron Road Garage. I saw a photograph, he said slowly, in the paper. She looked at him. The article about whether Douglas Reed's daughter can keep the place running? He said. Quietly. That one. She didn't say anything. There wasn't anything to say. William looked down at his hands again. Then he said something she hadn't expected. What would your father say right now? She thought about it. She thought about it honestly, not the answer she was supposed to give, but the actual answer. He'd tell me to check the bike, she said, before anything else. Make sure the machine is okay. People can wait. Machines can't. William looked at her for a long moment. Then, quietly, he started to laugh. Mockingly. Not nervously. Just genuinely, as if something had suddenly made more sense to him than it had before. Yeah, he said. That sounds right. Samantha walked over to the Sportster, crouched down, ran her hands along the frame in the dark, feeling for what her eyes couldn't see. Behind her, William Dawson sat on his concrete wall and watched a 24-year-old woman diagnose his motorcycle by touch in the dark on the side of a highway 40 seconds after putting 5 men on the ground. He had spent 19 years in a world that respected exactly 2 things: loyalty and the willingness to stand when standing cost you something. He had not expected to find both of those in a girl mechanic outside Red Creek, Colorado on a Tuesday night. There it was. She didn't call the police. He didn't ask her to. That was a thing she would think about. Later, the assumption they had both made, simultaneously, without discussion. In the world William Dawson had lived in, you handled things. You didn't report them because reporting them changed the shape of things in ways that were usually worse than the original problem. In the world Samantha had grown up, in the world of Douglas Reed, who had once let a man pay for a full engine rebuild in firewood and never once considered calling a judge about it, you also mostly handled things. So they sat, him on the wall, her beside the Sportster, one hand still resting on the engine casing the way you rest a hand on something you're listening to. Name's clean, she said. The engine's fine. There's something going on with the primary drive, but that's not new. You've been riding with that for a while. 3 weeks, he admitted. 3 weeks, she looked at him. You knew it was a problem and kept going. I had somewhere to be. Where? He hesitated. The way people hesitate when they're deciding how much of the truth is appropriate for the situation. He said. My daughter. Samantha nodded. She didn't ask anything else. She understood the kind of trip where you can't stop, where the mechanical problems are secondary to the forward momentum, where stopping might mean not going at all. You can ride it to Red Creek, she said, but I wouldn't push it past that tonight. The primary drive could go, and you'd lose the chain. On the highway at speed, that's serious. He looked at her. Red Creek have a good shop? One, she said. Any good? She looked at him flatly. Bring it in the morning. I'll have it done by noon. Understanding moved across his face. But Jenny Road, he said. Iron Road. He was quiet for a moment. Then I looked at the photograph this morning, and I thought the paper was implying she can't do it. Implying it the way papers do when they're too polite to say it outright. They've been implying it since I opened, Samantha said. She was not angry when she said it. She was simply reporting. Does it bother you? She considered the question. It used to. It used to bother me so much I couldn't sleep. She looked out at the highway. Now it just makes me work harder. Because the only answer to someone saying you can't do something is doing it until they run out of things to say. William was quiet for a long time. Then he said, my daughter thinks I don't believe in her. Samantha turned her head, looked at him. I do, he said. I just never said it right, never found the right time. And then the time gets farther away and the distance gets longer and... He stopped himself. I don't know why I'm telling you this. Because I asked about Flagstaff, she said. You didn't ask anything. I know, she said, but you answered anyway. He looked at her for a moment. Something shifted in his face, not softness exactly, but the particular openness of a person who has just recognized something true. How old are you? He asked. 24. You talk like someone older. I've had to. He nodded slowly. The kind of nod that isn't a response to a single statement, but to a whole collection of things you've just understood about a person. I'll bring the bike in the morning, he said. 8 o'clock, she said. I open early. She stood up, picked up her repair bag. The chain went back inside it because it was a tool, and tools go back where they belong. One question, William said. She stopped. When you drove past and saw what was happening, what made you stop? Most people don't. She picked up her bag. She had the answer. She'd had it for years. It wasn't the answer she had manufactured for moments like this. It was the actual answer. The one that lived in her chest and had been there since she was 11 years old on a playground in Red Creek, watching a smaller kid get surrounded. My father said, if you see someone standing alone against the world, she said, you be the person who stops. She walked back to her truck. William Dawson sat on his concrete wall in the dark, outside an abandoned gas station on Red Creek Highway, and listened to the sound of her engine turning over and pulling away. He stayed there for a while. He wasn't sure how long. Long enough for the silence to settle. Then he looked at the Sportster. What do you think? He said to it. The bike naturally said nothing, but he already knew. The next morning, Raymond Carter arrived at Iron Road at 7:43 with 2 coffees from the gas station down the road, the real gas station, the one that was still open, and found Samantha already in the bay, the Electra Glide from Thursday's appointment somehow already in pieces. Stopped in the doorway. Looked at the parts laid out on the floor. Samantha. Looked at the parts again. You sleep? He said. Some like 3 hours, or some like you're lying to me? More than 2, less than 4. Raymond put the coffees down on the bench, sat on his stool. Anything happen? She was quiet for a moment. The kind of quiet that isn't nothing, that has weight to it. Had a stop on the way home last night, she said. He waited. 6 men had an older biker down on the ground at the abandoned station on Highway 62. Raymond was very still. And I stopped. Another pause. Samantha. He's bringing his bike in at 8. She kept working. Primary drive issue. I told him noon. Raymond picked up his coffee. He didn't say anything for a long time. He was the kind of man who understood when more words would be fewer. Finally, he said, were you hurt? No. Were they? Some of them will have interesting mornings, she said. Raymond was quiet, and then very quietly he said, and he was. Your father would have done the same thing. She stopped working. Just for a second, her hands went still. I know, she said, and went back to work. At 8:12, William Dawson rolled the cherry red Sportster through the door of Iron Road Motorcycle Garage. Raymond looked at the bike, looked at the man, looked at Samantha. Samantha looked at the primary drive. The bearing's going, she said, and the chain's stretched. I need to replace both. Can you do it by noon? I said noon, she said simply. Watch the exchange. Watch the particular quality of it, the way this older man, with the kind of weathered authority that usually made men smaller, talked to Samantha like she was the authority in the room. Because she had established that last night on a dark highway in a way that didn't require explaining. He drank his terrible coffee and didn't say a word. 3 hours and 40 minutes later, the Sportster ran like it was new. William Dawson stood beside it and listened to the engine with his eyes closed. There was something almost reverential about it, the way a person who loves a machine listens to it running right for the first time. It hasn't sounded like that since Nevada, he said. Because whoever worked on it in Nevada didn't replace the bearing, Samantha said. They adjusted around it. That's not a fix. That's a postponement. How'd you know they'd worked on it in Nevada? She pointed at a barely visible mark on the casing, a small stamp, the kind that certain shops in Nevada used to track their work. William stared at it. I didn't know that was there. It's small, she said. You'd have to know what you were looking for. Then what do I owe you? She gave him the number. Fair. Not cheap, but fair. The kind of price that tells you the person doing the work values their time without needing to prove it. He paid in cash the way she'd expected. At the door, he stopped. And from last night, he said. They weren't random. I've had trouble before. On the road, she looked at him. I'm telling you, he said, because if there's a second group, and there might be, they could come here looking for me. I need you to know that. She considered it. All right, she said. Right? He seemed genuinely surprised. I just told you there might be dangerous men coming to your shop, and you said, all right? What do you want me to say? He didn't have an answer. I don't scare easy, she said, and I don't chase people away because they have problems. If someone comes here, I'll deal with it. Same as last night. He stared at her for a long moment. Then he said very quietly, you know what the hardest thing is? In this life, in the thing I spent 19 years doing, the hardest thing isn't facing danger. It's finding people who stand when everything tells them to sit. She picked up her wrench. I've been told to sit my whole life, she said. I don't have the habit. William Dawson walked out the door. Raymond Carter, from his stool, watched him go. Then he looked at Samantha. Who is he? Raymond asked. Don't know exactly, she said. Him something. Former Hell's Angel, I think. On his way to Flagstaff. Raymond was very still. What? She said. Do you know what Hell's Angels members call somebody who stands between them and danger without being asked? She said. Raymond put down his coffee. They don't have a word for it, he said. It almost never happens. He picked up a wrench. It'd work. Samantha looked at the door William had just walked through. Then she went back to the Electroglide because there was still work to be done, and the work didn't wait for anyone. Outside on Red Creek Highway, a cherry red Sportster turned west and disappeared. And in a town that had spent 14 months wondering if Douglas Reed's daughter could hold things together, something had just shifted. Nobody in Red Creek knew it yet, but they would. The day after William Dawson rode out of Red Creek, Samantha went back to work like nothing had happened. That was the only way she knew how to do things. You showed up, you opened the bay, you picked up the wrench. Whatever had happened the night before, whatever was still sitting in your chest, unprocessed and heavy, it waited until the work was done, because the work didn't wait for you. Raymond came in at his usual time. He didn't ask her more questions about William Dawson. He had asked what he needed to ask and gotten what he needed. And Raymond Carter was not a man who pulled at loose threads just to see where they went. He made his terrible coffee, sat on his stool, and they worked in the comfortable silence of two people who had been in the same room long enough to understand each other without talking. But that morning was different from other mornings, and Samantha felt it even if she couldn't explain it precisely. A kind of difference that doesn't announce itself. It just sits in the air, in the way sounds land differently, in the way ordinary things feel slightly too ordinary, like the world is trying too hard to seem normal. She was torquing the head bolts on a 4-road King when the first person came in. He wasn't a customer. She knew that immediately, not because of the way he looked, but because of the way he stood in the doorway. Customers came in uncertain, even the ones who pretended not to be. This man came in the way people come into a space they've already decided something about. He was maybe 40, compact, with the kind of posture that said military or corrections or both. He had a Red Creek County jacket on and a radio clipped to his hip, but he wasn't in uniform and the radio was civilian. You Samantha Reed, he said. Depends who's asking, she said. She didn't put the torque wrench down. Dave Whitfield. I do security consulting for some of the businesses on this corridor. He paused. I heard about what happened last night on Highway 62, kept moving. Word travels fast in a small town. It does. He came a step closer. The 6 men you encountered, we think we know who they are. There's a group that's been working this stretch of highway for about 8 months. Targeting travelers. Bikes mostly because bikes carry cash, and bikes are hard to report stolen quickly. He paused again. The man they were after last night, William Dawson. Do you know who he is? He's a customer, she said. Whitfield looked at her carefully. He's a former Hell's Angels member with a history that's complicated. That targeted him, knew who he was. That's not random crime. That's something more specific. Samantha put the torque wrench down, turned around, looked at Whitfield fully for the first time. Why are you telling me this? Because you put 5 of their men on the ground, Whitfield said. And in that world, that's not something that gets forgotten. She looked at him for a long moment. She was weighing him not consciously, just the way you weigh everything. The way her father had taught her to weigh everything. A mechanic who doesn't diagnose properly before they start working causes more damage than they fix. Are you warning me or questioning me? She said. Something almost like respect moved across Whitfield's face. He said honestly. Then here's my answer to both, she said. A man was on the ground. I stopped. I don't have more information than that, and I don't need more information than that. If someone wants to come looking for me about it, they'll find me here. Same as always. Whitfield looked at her for another moment. Then he nodded once, the kind of nod that's also an answer, and walked back out the door. Raymond, from his stool, hadn't moved. After Whitfield's car pulled away, he said, You think he was telling the truth? All of it. Mostly, she said. She picked the torque wrench back up. The part About the group targeting the corridor, probably true. About him doing security consulting, maybe. About him caring about my safety. She stopped. That part I'm less sure about. What do you think he actually wanted? To see what I'd do when someone made what happened last night sound like a bigger problem than I understood it to be, she said. He wanted to see if I'd get scared. Raymond drank his coffee. If it worked, I'd have said something different, she said. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, very slowly, Samantha, I want to ask you something and I want you to answer me honestly. And she kept working. I'll try. Last night, and I'm not questioning what you did, I want to be clear about that. But last night, when you stopped that truck and got out, were you scared? Hands went still, just for a second. Then they started again. Yes, she said, but you did it anyway. The fear came after, she said. While it was happening, there wasn't room for it. It was only the situation. She paused. The fear came at 2 a.m, when I was home and the adrenaline was gone, and I was sitting at my kitchen table realizing what could have happened. Another pause. I sat there for about an hour. Raymond was quiet for a long time. Then he said, your father used to do the same thing. Come home from something that had mattered, sit at the kitchen table and be very quiet. He took a sip of his coffee. Your mother used to say he was processing. He used to say he was listening. Listening to what? To whether he'd made the right call, Raymond said. Because the ones that matter, you can always second guess them. The ones that don't matter, you forget about. The ones that do those are the ones you sit with. Samantha thought about that. She thought about it. The way she thought about a mechanical problem. She couldn't quite solve yet, not forcing it. Just leaving it on the workbench of her mind and letting it sit. Did he ever decide he'd made the wrong call? She asked. Raymond said, maybe twice. He put down his coffee. Last night wasn't one of those. She nodded, just once, and went back to work. The second thing that happened that morning came at 11:47, which she knew because she had looked at the clock 60 seconds earlier when she started the Road King's engine to test the head work, and she was still listening to it run when the 3 bikes pulled into the lot. Not 3 bikes like a coincidence, 3 bikes like a formation, like people who knew each other well enough to arrive together without discussing it. She killed the Road King's engine, listened to the 3 bikes idle. Then she walked out of the bay. The 3 men who got off the bikes were somewhere between her age and Raymond's, which was a spread of about 40 years with a lot of road in between. They all wore Cuts leather vests with patches, but she didn't read the patches immediately. She read the men first, the way her father had taught her: posture, hands, eyes. What are the hands doing? Where are the eyes going? The hands were relaxed. The eyes went straight to her, in the middle PM height, somewhere in his 40s, with forearms that looked like they'd been carved out of something that used to be harder than it currently was. Looked at her for a moment and then looked at the shop behind her. Iron Road, he said. That's right, she said. You're Douglas Reed's daughter? She didn't flinch. 14 months of people saying that to her, and she had learned to receive it. The way you receive cold water, you feel it, you register it, you don't let it knock you over. I'm Samantha Reed, she said. I own Iron Road. The man studied her. Not aggressively, more like he was checking something against something else, comparing what he was seeing with what he'd expected to see. My name's Curtis, he said. We knew your father. That landed differently than she expected. Not painfully, just differently. Because almost everyone in Red Creek claimed to have known her father. Half of them were telling the truth, and half of them were trying to get something out of it, and the ones who were telling the truth usually didn't lead with it. How'd you know him? She said, a 72 Ironhead for me in 2009 that every other shop in 3 counties had told me was unrideable, Curtis said. He charged me fair. Did it in 4 days. Said the only reason it was unrideable was because nobody had taken the time to understand what was actually wrong with it. She looked at him. What was wrong with it? The cases were cracked, Curtis said. Not where anyone had looked. He found it by, I don't know exactly. He listened to it, he said. Samantha was quiet for a moment. He always listened first, she said. Yeah, Curtis nodded. He did. He paused. We heard about last night, and there it was. There was the reason for the arrival, the formation. All 3 of them were looking at her, not like mechanics look at a shop, but like something else entirely. It really does travel fast, she said. Certain circles, Curtis said, it travels faster than most. She looked at the patches on his vest then, really looked, and she recognized the emblem not from personal experience, but from years of working on bikes owned by men who wore cuts. From the particular way those men held themselves, her father's voice saying certain names with a certain kind of careful respect. "You know William Dawson," she said. It was not a question. Just looked at her steadily. "Iron Will. Yeah, we know him." A pause. "He called this morning." She absorbed that. William had called someone, had made contact, had told people what had happened, or at least some version of it. "What did he say?" she said. "He said a girl mechanic outside Red Creek stopped her truck on a dark highway and put 5 men down with a chain to save a man she'd never met." Curtis's voice was entirely level. He said she was 24 years old. He said she fixed his primary drive in under 4 hours. And he said that when he warned her that there might be more trouble coming, she told him she didn't scare easy and didn't send people away because they had problems. Samantha didn't say anything. She was very aware of Raymond in the doorway of the shop behind her, not moving, not speaking. He also said, Curtis continued, that the last thing she told him was that she'd been told to sit her whole life and didn't have the habit. Silence. "So," Curtis said, "we wanted to meet the mechanic." She looked at all 3 of them. She looked at Curtis. She made a decision that was both completely intuitive and completely deliberate at the same time, the way the best decisions usually are. "You want coffee?" she said. Curtis looked at the other 2 men. Back at her. "Is it any good?" he said. "No," she said. "It's genuinely terrible, but there's a lot of it." Something shifted in Curtis's face. Something that was not quite a smile, but was in the same neighborhood. "Yeah," he said. "All right." They sat in the shop, the 3 men from the bikes, and Raymond and Samantha, and the coffee was, as advertised, genuinely terrible, and nobody said anything about it. 2 companions introduced themselves as Marco and a man who went by Shep, and both of them said very little, but watched everything the way people watch when they've learned that watching tells you more than asking. Talked about William Dawson. Not the story of last night that was apparently already covered, but the man himself. 19 years in the club, a reputation for being the kind of person who showed up when it mattered. 3 years ago, health problems nothing he'd specify that had slowed him down and sent him toward a quieter life. A daughter in Flagstaff he was trying to reach. "He talk about the daughter?" Curtis asked her. "A little," Samantha said. Said she thinks he doesn't believe in her. Just looked at his coffee cup. "He's not good at saying what he means. Never has been. He feels things, the right things, mostly, but they get stuck somewhere between his chest and his mouth." He paused. "That's why what he said about you this morning, the fact that he called and said it, that's not nothing. Iron Will doesn't call to report things. He handles things and keeps moving. The fact that he stopped and called means something got through." She sat with that for a moment. Let it be what it was without trying to analyze it to death. "The men from last night," she said. "Whitfield came this morning. Said they've been working this stretch of highway for 8 months. Expression changed. Not dramatically, just a degree of stillness that hadn't been there before. "Field came here this morning. Said he does security consulting." Ernest and Marco exchanged a look. A brief one, but she caught it. She said, "Whitfield's not entirely wrong about what he told you," Curtis said carefully. "There is a group working this corridor. They've hit 4 travelers in the last 3 months. 2 of them were people we know." He put his coffee down. "Whitfield has interests in this area that aren't entirely about security. He has relationships with people who, let's say, they'd rather the problem got handled quietly in ways that benefit certain parties. And coming here," she said, "was probably about figuring out how much you know and how much of a variable you are," Curtis said. 24-year-old mechanic who stops on a dark highway and puts down 5 men is unpredictable. And predictable things make certain people uncomfortable. She thought about that. "He wanted to scare me into being quiet or into being grateful that someone was looking out for you," Curtis said, which is a softer version of the same thing. She nodded slowly. She had known that already, had felt it during the conversation, in the way you feel the misalignment in a component before you can articulate exactly what's wrong with it. But hearing it confirmed sharpened it into something she could work with. "What do you want from me?" she asked Curtis directly. He looked at her. "No evasion, no pivot. Right now? Nothing. We came to meet you because William told us to meet you. And when Iron Will tells you to do something, you do it. because he's right more often than anyone else we know. And he paused. Down the road, we might ask if we can send business your way. We have members and associates who travel this corridor. Good mechanics who don't ask wrong questions are harder to find than most people think. Ask wrong questions, she said. I asked the right ones. Then actually smiled. Yeah, that's what he said. They finished the terrible coffee. Shep, who had been almost entirely silent, stood up to leave and then stopped and turned back. The chain, he said. His voice was low and direct. Cycle chain. Where'd you learn to use it like that? Samantha looked at him. I didn't learn it anywhere. I just knew what it was, a tool. Weight, momentum, geometry. Same as everything else. Shep looked at her for a moment. He said, not dismissively, like something had just confirmed something for him. They left the way they arrived in formation, clean and deliberate. She stood in the doorway and watched the 3 bikes pull onto the highway. Raymond came to stand beside her. You know what just happened? He said. I got offered a referral network. She said. No, Raymond said. You got vetted. She looked at him. There's a difference, he said, between being told about someone and being checked. What they just did was check. They looked you in the eye. They asked the question about the chain, which wasn't about the chain. And now they're going to report back to William Dawson that what he told them was accurate. Raymond paused. That means something in their world. Their world, she said. And maybe yours now, Raymond said quietly. Whether you like it or not. She stood there in the doorway of Iron Road Motorcycle Garage and thought about that for a moment, about whether she liked it or not, about whether it mattered whether she liked it, or whether things that are true wait around for you to decide how you feel about them. She went back to work, because that was what there was to do. But the day wasn't finished with her yet. At 3:20 in the afternoon, a truck she didn't recognize parked across the street from Iron Road and stayed there. No one getting out, just sitting. She noticed it at 3:23, the second time she walked across the bay to the parts shelf. By 3:35, it was still there. By 3:50, she had memorized the license plate and the truck model and was working with the particular concentrated calm of someone who has decided to pay attention to something without reacting to it yet. Raymond noticed it at 4 o'clock. How long, he said quietly. 7 minutes, she said. He didn't say anything for a moment. Then, do you want to call someone? She thought about Curtis's number, which he had left on the back of a gas station receipt before he rode out. She looked at it sitting on the workbench. She thought about what calling it would mean, what it would mean about who she was asking for help, and what kind of relationship that created. Not yet, she said. At 4:12, the truck door opened and a man got out. He was not one of the 6 from last night, she was sure of that. He was younger, maybe 30, with the uncomfortable body language of someone who had been told to do something he wasn't sure about. He crossed the street, came to the doorway of the bay. You Samantha Reed, he said. Who sent you, she said. She had stopped working. She was holding a wrench, and she was not pretending to still be working because she had decided at some point in the last hour that she was done, pretending things were fine when they were something else. The young man blinked. I'm just supposed to deliver a message. Who? He hesitated. A man named Garrett. He says you should have stayed in your truck last night. He says the man you helped isn't worth the kind of trouble he brings. He says, if you care about your shop, you'll let this go. She looked at him for a long moment. He was not a threat, she could see that. He was an errand. He was uncomfortable and a little scared and had probably been told this was a simple job. Tell Garrett, she said, that I didn't stay in my truck because I was thinking about William Dawson's value or my shop's value. I stopped because someone needed help. She paused. And tell him that threatening people through their business is the kind of thing that doesn't stay quiet in a small town. It gets around. The young man stood there for a moment. He seemed to be trying to decide if there was something else he was supposed to say. He finally said, That's it, she said. You want a coffee before you go? Fair warning, it's terrible. He stared at her. Then he turned and walked back to the truck. She watched it pull away. She listened to the direction it turned east toward the county line. Raymond set down the thing he was holding, a gasket he'd been pretending to examine for the last 3 minutes. He said slowly, I know that name. She looked at him. He runs freight on this corridor, has for about 12 years. Raymond was quiet for a moment. Your father turned down work from him once. About 7 years ago, wanted jobs done on trucks that had modification. Your father said weren't legal. Douglas said no. Garrett pushed. Douglas said no again. He paused. After that, Garrett sent people around saying Douglas overcharged and did bad work. Lasted about 6 months. And then it stopped because everyone who actually used this shop knew it wasn't true. Samantha was very still. You never told me that. You never needed to know it, Raymond said, until now. She thought about that. She thought about how much of her father's history she didn't know, how much of what Douglas Reed had built existed not just in the tools and the lift and the concrete floor, in a network of decisions made and stands taken and prices paid over 30 years that she had inherited without a receipt. He's connected to the group on the highway, she said. Not a question. He'd have to be, Raymond said. The timing's too clean. You help William Dawson on Tuesday night. Wednesday morning, Whitfield comes to check your temperature. Wednesday afternoon, Garrett sends a message. He paused. That's a coordinated response. They talked. Which means they're worried, she said. Which means, Raymond said carefully, that what you did last night was bigger than a fight at a gas station. She stood very still in the bay of her father's shop, with the smell of oil and metal and coffee that was genuinely terrible, and she felt the shape of it, the full shape of it, for the first time. She had thought she stopped to help one man, but the act of stopping, the act of getting out of the truck, had landed in the middle of something larger that had been running parallel to her ordinary life for months without her knowing it. On the highway, the man named Garrett, the connection between freight and crime on a rural Colorado corridor. Dawson, who was not just an old biker, but a specific kind of man with a specific kind of history that made him a specific kind of target. She had stepped into the middle of all of it with a motorcycle chain and her father's words in her head, and now she was in it. Raymond, she said, yeah? Did my father ever back down from something once he'd taken a stand on it? Raymond thought about it. Twice, he said. Once when he was wrong. Once when it would have hurt your mother. He paused. Otherwise, no. She nodded. She picked up the wrench. Back to the road, King. Then we keep working, she said. And they did. Raymond left at 6. Samantha kept going until 9, not because there was an urgent deadline, but because the work was the only thing that made the rest of it manageable. As long as her hands were moving, her mind was clear. That was something she had learned at age 7, watching her father rebuild a carburetor on a Saturday afternoon with the particular focused piece of a man who had found the exact right place for himself in the world. She was closing up the bay lights off one by one, tools back in their places, because a disorganized tough shop was a shop that lost time it couldn't afford when her phone rang. She didn't recognize the number. Colorado area code, but not Red Creek. She almost let it go to voicemail. Then she answered. This is Samantha Reed, she said. The voice on the other end was female, younger than Samantha had expected. Slightly careful, the way voices are when they're not sure how they're going to be received. My name is Leah Dawson, the voice said. William Dawson is my father. Samantha stopped moving. He called me this afternoon, Leah said. He doesn't call me. We talk, but he doesn't call. He usually waits for me to call because he says he doesn't want to push himself where he's not wanted. A pause. But today he called me and told me what happened last night. You did. Another pause. He said you told him. Your dad used to say if you see someone standing alone against the world, you be the person who stops. Samantha leaned against the wall of the bay. She could feel the cold of the concrete through her jacket. She said, he's coming to Flagstaff, Leah said. I knew he was coming, but I didn't. I hadn't decided how I felt about it yet. I wanted him to. A long pause. And then he called me today and told me about you and what you said. And he said he's been sitting with something he's needed to tell me for a long time, and he thinks it's time to stop sitting. She didn't know what to say to that, so she said the true thing. Talked about, Samantha said. After the fight, when we were just sitting, he said, you think he doesn't believe in you? Silence on the line. Does he? Leah said. Her voice was careful and young and carrying something heavy. Samantha thought about the man who had sat on a concrete wall at a closed-down gas station and talked about his daughter to a woman he'd just met, about the particular quality of pain in the way he'd stopped himself mid-sentence and said, I don't know why I'm telling you this. He was. About the way he'd listened to his bike run when she handed it back to him, with reverence, with relief, with the expression of a man who was practicing how to receive something good. I think, Samantha said, slowly, that he has a lot he's never found the right way to say. And I think the right way was always simpler than he made it, and I think he knows that now. She paused. I think he's coming to Flagstaff because you matter more to him than anything. And somewhere between Red Creek Highway and that phone call, he decided that was worth saying out loud. Leah was quiet for a long time. I just wanted to thank you, she said finally, stopping. I couldn't do anything else, Samantha said honestly. After she hung up, she stood in the dark of the bay for a few minutes, listening to the ordinary sounds of a small shop after hours, the tick of the metal cooling, the faint hum of the single light she'd left on by the door, the distant sound of a truck on the highway. She thought about her father, about the way he had moved through the world, not loudly at all, but with a kind of weight that good people have, a density, a realness that you feel even when they're not in the room. She thought about the fact that what she had done last night had begun a phone call that would happen in Flagstaff between a father and a daughter who needed to speak plainly to each other. She thought about the fact that she had not known any of this when she stepped out of her truck. She had known one thing: someone was on the ground and she was capable of helping. That was all. That was enough. She finished locking up. She picked up a repair bag. She walked to her truck. On the seat, she had put Curtis's number, the one on the gas station receipt. She had put it there in the morning so she wouldn't lose it. She looked at it for a long time. Then she put it in her jacket pocket. Not because she needed it tonight, but because Raymond was right. She was in something now. Not by accident, or maybe by accident in the beginning, but not anymore. The shape of it was becoming clear. Garrett and the corridor, and the group that had been hitting travelers for 8 months. Whitfield and his interests. William Dawson and what he represented and why certain people had wanted him gone. And Samantha Reed, who had been told her whole life that she didn't belong in a room, standing exactly at the center of all of it with grease on her hands and her father's wrench and a stubbornness that had no practical bottom. She started the truck. She drove home on Red Creek Highway, the same road as the night before. She passed the abandoned gas station. She didn't look at it long, just once, briefly. The way you look at a place where something important happened, acknowledging it without making it into more than it was. It was empty, but what had happened there was already moving outward in all directions, the way things do when they're real. She kept driving. She had a long few days ahead of her, and Samantha Reed had never once walked away from work that needed doing. They came in hard. Samantha knew it. The moment she unlocked the bay at 7:50 and found the note tucked under the wiper blade of the Electra Glide she'd parked outside overnight. Not a note, a piece of cardboard torn from a box, 3 words written in black marker, with the particular pressure of someone who wanted to be sure it wouldn't smear. Let it go. She stood there holding it for about 4 seconds. She put it in her jacket pocket, right next to Curtis's number on the gas station receipt, and went inside to start the terrible coffee. Raymond found her at the workbench. When he arrived at 8:15, the cardboard note laid flat beside her coffee cup, and he read it without touching it. Same handwriting as a man who doesn't think consequences apply to him, he said. You can tell that from 3 words, she said. I can tell it from the pressure, Raymond said. He pushed hard enough to nearly go through. That's not someone communicating. That's someone performing. He sat on his stool. Garrett's getting nervous, she said. Raymond looked at her. Samantha. Nervous people do stupid things. Nervous people with connections to a group that puts men on the ground for sport. That's a different category of problem than a bad review on the internet. I know what category it is, she said. Do you? She turned to face him. Carter had 63 years, and 11 of them spent inside the kind of motorcycle world that didn't show up in magazines. And the look on his face right now was not the look of a man being cautious. It was the look of a man who had been in rooms where things went wrong and was trying to keep cared about out of those rooms. Up in this shop, she said, I grew up watching my father deal with exactly this kind of pressure. Competitors who spread rumors, customers who tried to renegotiate after the work was done, county business board that tried twice to add inspection fees specifically targeted at independent shops. He never moved, not once. She picked up her coffee. I'm not moving either. Your father didn't have a group of highway criminals sending him cardboard notes, Raymond said. Father dealt with Garrett, she said. 7 years ago. You told me that yesterday. He said no and he kept saying no, and eventually Garrett ran out of steam. She looked at the note. Garrett ran out of steam then because my father didn't give him anything to push against. I'm doing the same thing. Raymond was quiet for a moment. Then, very carefully, there's a difference between this situation and your father's. William Dawson, Raymond said. When your father dealt with Garrett, he was just a mechanic who said no to illegal modifications. Simple Garrett had no angle beyond frustration. He paused. You're now connected, in Garrett's mind, and in the minds of whoever he works with, to a former Hell's Angel who was specifically targeted on this corridor. That makes you part of a story that was already in motion. That's not as being a mechanic who said no. She heard him. She actually heard him, which was different from listening. She let it sit for a moment, the full weight of what he was saying, without pushing it away or minimizing it. What do you want me to do? She said. Call Curtis, he said. And today. She looked at the receipt on the workbench, his number in blue pen, on the back of a gas station receipt. She had looked at it 6 times since yesterday afternoon. Calling Curtis means asking for something, she said. It changes the relationship. You already have the relationship, Raymond said. William Dawson made that call. Curtis came here. Shep asked about the chain. Relationship exists. The only question now is whether you're going to use it or pretend you're still alone in this. He picked up his coffee. Not alone in this. She stood there for another moment. Then she picked up her phone and dialed the number. He answered on the second ring, which told her he had been expecting the call. Samantha Reed, he said. Someone left a note on a customer's bike overnight, she said. 3 words, no signature, a pause, brief but weighted. What did it say? Let it go. Another pause, longer. Are you right now? Shop. Stay there, he said. I'll be there by 10. He hung up. She put the phone down. Raymond was watching her. He said, stay there, she said. Good man, Raymond said, and refilled his terrible coffee. Curtis arrived at 9:58, which was 2 minutes early, which told her something about how he drove when he was thinking about something. He came alone this time, no Marco, no Shep, just Curtis on his bike, and the particular kind of focused stillness that Samantha was beginning to understand was his version of urgency. He looked at the note. He turned it over. He set it back down. He said, that's what we think, she said. Not just Garrett. He pulled up a stool, not Raymond's stool, the spare one near the part shelf, which told her he understood the hierarchy of the shop without being told. There's a man named Roy Briggs who runs the operational side of the corridor group. Is the money. Briggs is the muscle. They've been working together for about 4 years. He paused. Is the reason the last 2 people who saw something on that highway didn't report it. She felt that land. Not panic, just clarity, the cold, specific clarity of understanding exactly what you're dealing with. How do you know this? She said. Because one of the 2 people they silenced was someone we knew, Curtis said. A member of our Durango chapter. He saw something on Highway 62 6 months ago, and 2 days later had a very serious accident on his bike that was later determined by us, not by the sheriff's department, to not be an accident. He looked at her directly, trying to build a case, quietly, without enough pieces. William being targeted last Tuesday wasn't random. People knew who he was. They were making a statement that even former Hell's Angels weren't immune on their corridor. And then I showed up, she said. And then you showed up, Curtis said, which is either the best or worst thing that could have happened, depending on how you look at it. How do you look at it? She said. He was quiet for a moment. Honestly, I think you showing up is the thing that breaks this open, because you're not connected to us, not officially, not in any way they can use. Civilian mechanic, you're the daughter of a well-liked local businessman, and you did what you did in front of a gas station on a public highway. That, and this is the part that matters, has a security camera. Samantha went very still. The old station, Curtis said. It's been closed for 3 years, but the camera on the southeast corner is still active. Runs on a solar panel that nobody bothered to disconnect. The footage goes to an off-site server that the original owner who moved to New Mexico has been automatically backing up without knowing it. She stared at him. You have the footage. We have access to someone who can get the footage, Curtis said carefully. And he was. We've known about the camera for 2 months. We've been waiting for the right moment to pull it, because once we pull it, Garrett and Briggs know we have it, and we need to be ready when that happens. He looked at her. Tuesday gave us the right moment. 6 men attacking a single traveler recorded in full. And then a 24-year-old mechanic getting out of her truck and stopping it. You want to use it, she said. We want to use it, he said. Not without your consent. Not without your understanding of what it means when that footage goes to the right people. He paused. Does, and I want you to be clear on this, Garrett. And Briggs will know exactly who you are. They already suspect. But suspicion and evidence are different things. When the footage goes public, there's no more ambiguity. She thought about that. She thought about it. The way she thought about a major repair decision, not rushing it, not glossing over the parts that were uncomfortable, sitting fully with what was true and what it meant. The cardboard note, she said. The visit from Whitfield. The young man with Garrett's message. She looked at Curtis. They already know who I am. The footage being public doesn't change my position, it changes yours. He looked at her for a long moment. Yeah, he said quietly. It does. Then stop treating this like you're protecting me from something, she said. Tell me what you actually need. He leaned forward, his forearms on his knees, the posture of a man who has decided to stop having a different conversation than the one he's actually in. We need you to make a statement, he said, a formal one, to a specific individual in the county sheriff's department who is not connected to Garrett or Briggs. We verified this. It took us 2 months to verify it, but we're certain. Deputy name is Karen Ossie. She's been building a file on the corridor group independently. She needs a witness statement that places the attack on William on the record. Combined with the footage and her existing file, it's enough to move. And what happens to me when it moves, Samantha said. In the short term, nothing good, Curtis said honestly. There's going to be pressure. There may be more notes. Maybe more men in trucks parked across the street. He paused. We will be present. We will not let what happened to our Durango member happen to you. I want you to know what you're agreeing to before you agree to it. She looked at him for a long time. She looked at Raymond. Raymond was looking at his coffee cup like it contained the answer to a question he'd been asking for a long time. Raymond, she said. Don't look at me, Raymond said, still looking at the cup. This one's yours. She looked back at Curtis. She thought about her father. And he was. About the night she'd been 12 when 2 men from a competing shop had come in and told Douglas Reed that if he didn't stop undercutting their prices, they were going to make sure the county inspector found problems in his facility. Her father had looked at the 2 men for a moment. Then he had picked up his phone, called the county inspector directly, and invited him to come anytime, announced or unannounced, to look at anything he wanted. The 2 men left. The inspector came. The shop was clean. The competing shop closed 18 months later for reasons that had nothing to do with Douglas Reed and everything to do with the quality of their own work. Her father had never called that courage. He had called it math. If you're clean, the light doesn't hurt you. Only dirty things need the dark. Tell me how to reach Deputy Ossie, Samantha said. Douglas reached into his cut and pulled out a card. Plain white, a name and a number and nothing else. She's expecting a call, he said. She doesn't know from who. She just knows someone with direct knowledge of Tuesday night is going to call. Samantha took the card, turned it over in her fingers. You've been planning this since Wednesday morning. Since Wednesday morning, he confirmed. When William called, he said, he told us about you. He also told us you'd call Curtis before you called anyone else. He said you'd sit on the decision for exactly as long as it took to be sure, and not 1 second longer. He paused. He's been right about people for 30 years. She sat with that for a moment. The image of William Dawson on a concrete wall in the dark, talking to her about his daughter, calling her by the kind of attention that doesn't have a name, the specific attention of a man who looks at you and sees who you actually are, not who he expected to find. Is he in Flagstaff yet? She said. He called from New Mexico this morning, Curtis said. He'll be there tonight. She nodded. She stood up. She picked up the card and put it in her pocket. I'll call her this afternoon, she said. Finish the Electroglide. Work first. Curtis stood up. He held out his hand. She shook at the grip of 2 people who have just agreed to something that matters. One more thing, he said. Briggs is going to hear about this meeting. Probably already knows I came here. He looked at her steadily. If anything changes anything that feels wrong, a face you don't recognize, a car that's been parked too long, anything, you call me first. The sheriff, not Whitfield. Me, why you first, she said. Because I can be here in 8 minutes, he said. The sheriff can't. He left. The bay was quiet. Raymond was still on his stool. 8 minutes, Raymond said. He clocked it on the way here, she said. She picked up a wrench. Electroglide won't finish itself. Raymond watched her go back to work. And for a moment, just a moment, he looked the way men look when they're watching something they know they'll remember. Then he picked up his own wrench and did the same. She called Deputy Karen Osi at 2:17 in the afternoon, between finishing the Electroglide and starting a brake job on a 9th Street glide that had come in mid-morning. She went to the back office, her father's old office, the one with the desk he'd built himself out of 2 sawhorses and a door, and she sat in the chair he used to sit in, and she called. She answered on the first ring. Deputy Osi. "My name is Samantha Reed," Samantha said. "I'm the owner of Iron Road Motorcycle Garage outside Red Creek. I was on Highway 62 last Tuesday night, and I need to make a statement about what I witnessed." Controlled professional. "Ms. Reed, I've been hoping to hear from someone with direct knowledge of Tuesday." Another pause. "Can you come in?" "I'd rather not come to the station," Samantha said. Not yet. If Garrett or Briggs have anyone watching the station or reporting foot traffic, I'd rather keep my name off the visitor log until we're ready to move." Swans. "Then, I know those names," she said. "How long have you known them?" "Since yesterday," she said honestly. "I knew the shape of the thing on Tuesday night. The attack wasn't random. The men weren't panicking or improvised. They were deliberate. They'd done it before, and they expected it to go a certain way." "How did it go instead?" Osi said. "Differently," Samantha said. Another pause. "Ms. Reed, how much do you know about the man who was attacked?" "William Dawson, former Hell's Angel. 19 years. Left the club in good standing. On his way to see his daughter in Flagstaff. His bike is a 69 XLCH Sportster that needs its primary drive placed about every 40,000 miles if the rider pushes it, which he does." She paused. "I know he's a good man who was targeted specifically, and that the men who targeted him were connected to Roy Briggs, and a man named Garrett who runs freight on this corridor." Complete silence on the line for 3 full seconds. "Reed," Osi said slowly, "I have been working this case for 7 months. I have been very careful about who knows what I know. The fact that you just named those connections in the order you named them tells me either you've been sitting on this information for longer than Tuesday, or someone who's been watching this situation closely brought you up to speed very quickly." "Quickly," Samantha said. "I'm a fast learner." "You connected to the Hells Angels?" "I'm a mechanic," she said. "I fix their bikes the same way I'd fix anyone else's. Same quality." "That's not what I asked." "I know," she said. "And the honest answer is that I met 3 men yesterday who are connected to the club, and they told me things because William Dawson asked them to, because of what happened on Tuesday. That's the full extent of my connection." A pause. "I don't belong to anyone. I belong to this shop." Osi was quiet for a moment, and then she said something Samantha hadn't expected. "Your father," she said. "Douglas Reed. I used to bring my brother's bike to him when I was a kid. My brother couldn't drive it himself yet, and I'd push it down the street." A pause. "Your father never once charged us more than it was worth, even when we couldn't pay immediately. He'd say, 'Give me what you have and square the rest when you can.'" Another pause. "He was a good man." Samantha closed her eyes for exactly 1 second. Opened them. "Yes," she said, "he was." "I'll come to you," Osi said. "That works. After 6. I won't come in a marked car." "I'll be here," Samantha said. She hung up. She sat in her father's office for a moment. She looked at the desk, the door on sawhorses, the surface worn smooth in the center from 30 years of elbows and paperwork and coffee cups, and the accumulated weight of a working life well lived. She pressed her hand flat against the worn center. Then she went back to the brake job. Osi came at 6:45. She drove a personal vehicle, older sedan, nothing distinctive, and she came alone, which Samantha took as deliberate information about how she handled things she wanted to keep quiet. She was in her 30s, precise in her movements. With the watchfulness of someone who had learned to pay attention to exits, she shook Samantha's hand without unnecessary ceremony and sat in the back office and took notes by hand on a yellow legal pad, not a tablet, not a phone, a legal pad, which told Samantha something about her relationship to records that might be discoverable later. Samantha told her everything, all of it, from the moment she turned onto Red Creek Highway to the moment the truck left the gas station lot. She did not editorialize. She described what she saw and what she did and in what sequence. She used precise language the way you use precise language with a caliper, not because you're performing, but because the difference between close and accurate is the difference between a part that fits and a part that she wrote and occasionally asked questions, not leading questions, clarifying ones, the kind that fill in the shape of something rather than push it in a direction. Samantha finished. OC put her pen down. You said 8 seconds, she said. Contact to the last man down, Samantha said. That's fast, OC said, not disbelieving. Assessing. I wasn't fighting, Samantha said. Fighting takes longer. I was redirecting. There's a difference. I used their weight and their momentum against them. It's the same principle as loosening a stuck component. You don't push harder, you change the angle. Oh, he looked at her for a moment. You think about everything in terms of mechanics. I think about everything in terms of what's true about it, Samantha said. Mechanics is just one version of that. OC nodded slowly. She looked at her legal pad, then she looked up. The footage from the camera on the southeast corner of the station. Do you know about it? Curtis mentioned it, Samantha said. Mentioned it. OC repeated. Then carefully, the club has been aware of that camera for 2 months. I've been aware of it for 3. We've each been waiting to pull it. She paused. Statement is what moves that. Once I file this, I have grounds to request the footage as corroboration of your testimony. The cleanest legal path. The footage on its own is arguable. The footage plus a witness statement from someone with no criminal history and no affiliation is much harder to dismiss. Key, Samantha said, not proudly, just factually. You're the key, OC confirmed, which means Garrett and Briggs are going to feel this the moment I file. She paused. How are you with that? Tired of being asked that question, Samantha said. She almost smiled. Fair. What's the timeline? Samantha asked. 48 hours for me to file and pull the footage. 24 to get it reviewed and confirmed by my contact at the state level. This is too big for the county to handle alone, and I've known that for months. She paused. 72 hours, roughly. Then it moves. And in 72 hours? In 72 hours, OC said Briggs and 2 of his key associates get very uncomfortable, and Garrett discovers that certain freight arrangements on Highway 62 are about to receive a level of attention he has never experienced before. She paused, and a 24-year-old mechanic in Red Creek becomes the reason a 7-month case closes. Samantha looked at her. That's not why I stopped my truck. I know, OC said. That's exactly why it matters. She left at 7:52. Samantha locked up the back offices. She stood in the bay alone for a moment, the smell of oil and metal, and the echo of work that had been done here for 30 years. And she felt something that was not quite pride and not quite fear and quite grief, but carried elements of all 3. She felt her father in the room, not mystically. Just the way you feel someone you knew well in the spaces they shaped, particular quality of a place that has been worked in honestly for a long time, she said quietly, to nobody, to the room, to the desk and the tools and the lift and the 30 years of decisions made right inside these walls. I know, her phone buzzed. She looked at it, a text from a New Mexico number. Williams, made it to Flagstaff. She let me in. We're talking. Time in a long time. Wanted you to know. She read it twice. Then she typed back, glad, safe riding home. She put the phone in her pocket. She turned off the bay light. She got in her truck and drove home on Red Creek Highway, past the abandoned gas station, not looking at it this time. Not because she was avoiding it, because she didn't need to anymore. That chapter was finished. The next one had already started, and it was going to move fast. She was almost home when the call came. Not a text this time, a call. Raymond, which was unusual because Raymond did not call people at 8 at night for ordinary reasons. She answered, Raymond. Someone broke into the shop, he said. Was completely flat, the flatness of a man containing something much louder. Back window. They didn't take anything that I can see, but they went through the office. A pause. Samantha. They went through your father's desk. She pulled the truck to the side of the road. I drove past to drop off a part I forgot earlier, Raymond said. The window light was wrong. I went around back and the window was open. Another pause. I called you first. I haven't called anyone else. She sat completely still for 3 seconds. Then she called Curtis. He answered on the first ring. What happened? Not a question. Because he'd been waiting for something to happen, and the only variable was what and when. Broke into the shop, she said. Office. My father's desk. Are you at the shop? I'm on the road. 2 minutes out. Don't go in until I get there. 8 minutes. He hung up. She called Raymond back. Don't touch anything. Don't go inside. I'm 2 minutes away. Already outside, Raymond said. She got there in 90 seconds. Raymond was standing at the far edge of the lot, which was exactly the right place to be visible from the road, not near the entry point, not contaminating anything. She pulled up beside him. Tell me exactly what you saw, she said. Back window on the east side, the small one by the storage shelf, not broken. Someone knew it doesn't latch properly from the outside. He paused. Someone who'd been inside the shop before, or who asked someone who had. Whitfield, she said immediately. Raymond looked at her. He was in the bay for about 4 minutes. Long enough to clock the window, she said. He arrived in 7 minutes and 40 seconds. He came around the back with a small flashlight and looked at the window without touching it. He looked at the ground below it. He went inside, moving the way men move when they've searched spaces before, methodically low first, checking corners first. He came back out 2 minutes later. They were looking for something specific, he said. The rest of the office is barely disturbed. The desk is different. Every drawer open and closed, again carefully, but in the wrong order. Someone who was looking for a document or a phone or a drive. He looked at Samantha. What does your father keep in that desk? I keep in that desk, she said quietly. It's my desk now. She thought about what was in it. Customer records, old invoices. A ledger my father kept by hand that goes back 22 years. She paused. And a folder. What kind of folder? About 6 months after my father died, I found an envelope in the back of the bottom drawer, she said slowly. Inside, it was a handwritten list of names, businesses, dollar amounts, dates going back about 4 years. I didn't know what it was. I put it in a folder in the same drawer because I didn't know what else to do with it. She looked at Curtis. I didn't know what I was looking at. But you do, don't you? It was very still. Your father kept records, he said, of freight jobs he turned down, with names and amounts and dates. I think so, she said. Because Douglas Reed was the kind of man who wrote things down, Curtis said, in case they ever mattered. The three of them stood in the dark behind Samantha's shop, and the weight of it settled over all of them at the same time. Father had known. Not everything, not the full scope, not names like Briggs and Garrett as an organized operation. He had sensed the shape of something wrong on this corridor 7 years ago, and he had done what Douglas Reed always did. He had written it down. He had kept the evidence. He had put it in the back of the bottom drawer of a desk he built himself and trusted that someday someone would know what to do with it. He had trusted his daughter with it without knowing he was doing it. Is the folder still there? Raymond said. I don't know, she said. She walked to the office door, pushed it open, went to the desk. The bottom drawer. The folder was gone. She stood there with the empty drawer open and the particular cold feeling of something irrevocable having just happened. Then she closed the drawer. She turned around. Curtis and Raymond were both watching her. I photographed it, she said. 6 months ago when I found it. I didn't know why. It seemed like the kind of thing you photograph. She pulled out her phone. It's in my cloud backup. Raymond made a sound, not a word, just a sound that meant thank God. Curtis looked at her for a long moment. Your father raised you right, he said. He raised me to document my work, she said. He said you always take a photo before you start a repair so you know where everything was when you found it. She looked at the phone in her hand. Same principle. She sent the photographs to Curtis. She sent them to Deputy O.C. She sent them to her own email from 2 different accounts. And then she texted the image files to Raymond's phone because Raymond's phone was old and boring and existed outside of any network that anyone was monitoring. Then she called O.C. They broke into the shop, she said when O.C. answered. They took a folder from my father's desk. I have photographs of the contents. You need to see them tonight. A pause, 1 beat. I'm already in my car, O.C. said. Don't go anywhere. Samantha sat down on the concrete floor of her father's office and leaned her back against the sawhorse desk and waited. Raymond sat in the doorway. Curtis stood outside on the phone with someone she couldn't hear, his voice low and steady. The night had turned into something none of them had planned for. But Samantha Reed had the photographs. Her father had kept the record. And 72 hours from now, Roy Briggs and Garrett and 6 years of freight corruption on a rural Colorado highway were going to meet the specific, irresistible weight of being wrong when the right people were paying attention. She leaned her head back against the desk. She could feel the wood through the back of her skull, the door her father had laid across two sawhorses, smooth in the center from 30 years of working life. She pressed her head against it, and she waited. Deputy Karen Ossie arrived at Iron Road at 9:14, and she did not waste time on preamble. She came through the back door, looked at the open window, looked at the desk, looked at Samantha sitting on the floor with her back against the sawhorses, and made a decision about all of it in approximately 4 seconds. "Show me the photographs," she said. Samantha handed her the phone. Ossie scrolled through them slowly with the particular stillness of someone who is recognizing things, learning things, recognizing them. The names, the dollar amounts, the dates. Her face did not change, but her breathing did, very slightly, the involuntary tell of a person whose body responds to significance before their mind finishes processing it. She handed the phone back. "How many people have you sent these to?" she said. "You my own email twice." Raymond's phone. She looked at Raymond in the doorway. Then at Curtis, who had come back inside. Then at the empty drawer. "The original is gone," she said. "That's intentional. They wanted the paper because paper can be argued about provenance, authenticity, chain of custody. Digital photographs of paper are harder to dismiss but easier to challenge." She paused. "Which means they're not trying to destroy evidence. They're trying to create doubt, can they?" Samantha said. "Not if your father's handwriting is verifiable," Ossie said. "Not if the names in those photographs match the names in my existing file. Not if the dates line up with freight manifests I've already pulled." She looked at Samantha directly. "Your father didn't just write down names, Ms. Reed. He wrote down dates and amounts with enough specificity that it corroborates 3 separate threads I've been pulling for 7 months. A pause. Douglas Reed was keeping a record because he knew that someday someone would need to prove something, and he wanted to make sure they could. Looked at the empty drawer for a moment. "He never told me," she said. "He wouldn't have," Ossie said. "Not unkindly. Telling you would have put you in the same position he was in. He kept it separate. Kept you clean." She paused, "Right up until the moment you stopped being clean on your own." Quiet for a moment. "Tuesday night," Curtis said, from where he was standing by the door. "Tuesday night," Ossie confirmed. "She stepped out of that truck. She connected herself to something your father had been holding at arm's length for 6 years. She looked at Samantha. He would have done exactly the same thing." That hit somewhere Samantha wasn't expecting. She felt it move through her. Not pain exactly, not grief exactly, but the particular sensation of understanding something about a person you love that you will never be able to tell them you understand. She stood up off the floor, pressed her hand flat against the worn center of the sawhorse desk for exactly 1 second. Then she turned around. "What do you need from me tonight?" she said. "Your phoners, temporarily, to copy those photographs to a secure server," Ossie said. "A written account of where you found the original folder, when and what you did with it, and your word that you will not speak to anyone about what's in those photographs, not to customers, not to anyone who comes asking, not in any form until I tell you it's safe." Samantha said, "All of it." Ossie worked efficiently. She was there 40 minutes, and she left with what she needed, and nothing extra. At the door she stopped and looked back at Samantha. 72 hours, she said. "Possible until then." And Samantha said, "Until then," Ossie said carefully, "you stay visible. You open the shop. You do your work. You do not change your routine in any way that signals to Garrett or Briggs that something has shifted." A pause. "Can you do that?" "I've been doing my work since my father died," Samantha said. "It's easy." Ossie nodded. She left. Curtis stayed another 10 minutes. He walked the perimeter of the shop, all 4 sides, checking what could be seen from the road, what couldn't, what sightlines existed and which didn't. He was methodical about it, in a way that told Samantha this was not his first time assessing a situation like this. He came back in, he said, "Marco is going to park at the end of your road tonight. Not here, end of the road. Far enough that it doesn't look like anything, but close enough that if something moves on this property, he knows about it. I don't need," she started. "Samantha," his voice was level, "let us do this one thing. Not because you can't handle yourself. We all know you can. Because you handled Tuesday night alone, and you shouldn't have to handle everything alone. That's not weakness. That's how things work when they work right." She stopped. She looked at him. She thought about what Raymond had said the morning after Tuesday. "You're not alone in this," she said. One night at a time, he said. That's all anyone can do. He left. Raymond stayed until 10:30, longer than she asked him to, and they didn't talk much. They just occupied the space together, which was its own kind of conversation. When he finally left, he put his hand briefly on her shoulder, the particular touch of a man who is not demonstrative and chooses his moments carefully, and then he was gone. She drove home. She did not sleep well. She lay in the dark and thought about her father, keeping a list in the bottom drawer of his desk for 6 years, writing down names and dates and amounts in his careful, unhurried handwriting, building a record he might never have expected to matter to anyone, but that he kept anyway, because that was the kind of man he was. She thought about the photographs on her phone, about Osie's face when she scrolled through them, about the word recognizing versus learning, and what it meant that those two things were different. At 3 in the morning, she stopped trying to sleep. She went to the kitchen table and sat with her father's coffee mug, the one she'd kept, the one she'd never put away. And she talked to him the way she sometimes did when the night was quiet enough. You knew, she said, you knew what was happening on that corridor, and you wrote it down, and you kept it, and you never told me. She paused. I'm not angry about that. I know why you did it. I know exactly why. She looked at the mug. I just wish I could tell you that it mattered, that you were right to keep it, that the list is going to do what you kept it to do. She put her hand around the mug. To Dad, I promise. She stayed at the table until 5:30. Then she got up, got dressed, and drove to Iron Road. She had work to do. The next 36 hours had a specific texture that she would remember for the rest of her life, not dramatic, not loud, taught in the way things are when the important is happening somewhere else. And you are holding the visible surface of ordinary life in place by sheer will. She opened the shop at 8. She fixed a 15th Street bob that came in with electrical gremlins. She traced to a corroded ground strap in 40 minutes flat. She called back 2 customers who had left messages. She invoiced 3 completed jobs. She made the terrible coffee, and Raymond drank it without complaint, and they worked in the same productive silence as always, except that the silence had a different quality, aware, alert, the way silence is when both people in a room are listening for something they can't name. The truck drove past the shop at 10:45. Across the street this time, just a slow pass, engine audible, and then gone. She registered it without reacting. She kept working. At noon, a man she didn't recognize came in asking about a custom paint job Iron Road did not do and had never done. She watched him look at things that a man wanting a paint job would not look at and answered his questions pleasantly and accurately, and watched him leave with the information that Iron Road was open and running and absolutely ordinary. Reconnaissance, Raymond said after the man left. She said, she was already back under the street bob. Making sure you're still here, he said. Making sure you haven't run. I don't run, she said from under the bike. At 2 o'clock, Curtis texted, all quiet on our end. She filed this morning. Clock is running. She showed it to Raymond. He read it and nodded and went back to work. The call that changed the texture of the day came at 4:17. She almost didn't recognize the number area code she didn't know, and she nearly let it go. Something made her answer. Iron Road, she said. On the other end was male. Older, very controlled. The control of someone who is accustomed to being the most composed person in the room. The voice said, my name is Michael Turner. I'm the chapter president of the Hells Angels Denver chapter. You don't know me. She said nothing. She waited. I've been speaking with William Dawson and with Curtis, Turner said. Briefed on what happened Tuesday and on the events since. I want to have a conversation with you if you're willing. About what specifically, she said. About Tuesday. Father. About what happens in the next 48 hours and what it means for a number of people, including you. A pause, and about something I'd like to offer you, which has no strings attached, but which I want you to understand clearly. She thought about it for 2 seconds, 2 full seconds, which was longer than most of her decisions took, but shorter than this one warranted. She said, tomorrow morning, Turner said. For you. 8 o'clock, she said. Open early. I know, he said. William told me that too. He hung up. She stood in the bay, holding her phone, and felt the particular sensation of a story finding its own shape, not the shape you planned, but the shape that was always there underneath, waiting for enough pieces to fall into place to make it visible. Raymond said, Michael Turner, she said, Denver chapter president. Raymond was very still. He said quietly, "His road name is Steelhawk." She looked at him. "You know him?" "I know of him," Raymond said carefully. "He's been in this world for a long time. He is not a man who makes unnecessary phone calls." He paused. "He called you directly. Not through Curtis. Not through William. He called you. What does that mean?" she said. "It means," Raymond said slowly, "that this has moved up." She thought about that for the rest of the afternoon. She thought about it with the part of her brain that wasn't occupied with a brake line replacement on a touring bike and a carburetor cleaning on a vintage Honda someone had dropped off without calling ahead. She thought about it the way she thought about problems that were too large to solve directly, by keeping her hands moving and letting the understanding work its way up from somewhere beneath the conscious level. What? She closed at 7. She went home. She slept better than she expected. At 6:45 the next morning, she was already in the bay when Marco pulled up, not at the end of the road, but in the lot, which told her Curtis had made a decision about proximity overnight. Marco nodded at her when she looked out. She nodded back. He parked and stayed in his bike. Michael Steelhawk Turner arrived at 7:58 in a truck, not a bike, which surprised her, and he got out alone, which surprised her less. He was in his 50s, not especially large, with the particular economy of movement of a man who had nothing to prove. He wore a vest with his patches, and he carried nothing in his hands, which she noticed because hands tell you things. He came into the bay, looked at the space with the unhurried attention of a man who reads rooms. "Douglas Reed's place," he said. "It was," she said. "Fine now." He looked at her. "I knew Douglas Reed." "Knew him." He paused. "Good man. Honest man. Fair and worked clean." He looked around the bay again. "Still smells the same. Oil and metal and something underneath that I can't name." "Years of work," she said. "It gets into the walls." Turner looked at her for a moment. "Raymond Carter still here?" "Weak," she said. He nodded. He pulled up the spare stool, not Raymond's stool, the same spare stool Curtis had used, and he sat down. Not performatively, just sat. "I'm going to tell you some things," he said. "And then I'm going to tell you one more thing that is separate from the rest. Take them in whatever order you need to." "Go ahead," she said. "Briggs and Garrett, the freight man, are going to be in custody by tomorrow morning," Turner said. "And OC has moved faster than her 72 hours because your father's list filled 3 gaps she couldn't fill before. State is involved. This is not a county operation anymore." He paused. 6 men from the corridor group have already been detained on related charges. Were most directly connected to what happened to our Durango member are among them. Another pause. "It's over. The operation is done." She absorbed that. Relief she felt was quieter than she'd expected, not a flood, just a slow, definite unclenching of something that had been tight since Tuesday night. "Whitfield," she said. "Whitfield is cooperating," Turner said, with the particular neutrality of someone who has opinions about a situation that they are choosing not to share. He had less investment in protecting Garrett than Garrett thought. When it became clear which way things were going, he chose accordingly. "Protecting himself the whole time," she said. "People usually are," Turner said simply. She let that sit for a moment. "Then you said there's something separate." He looked at her steadily. "The men from our Durango chapter who were hurt 6 months ago, what happened to them mattered to us. It went unresolved for longer than it should have, partly because we didn't have what we needed. Father's list, your statement, the footage from the camera, those 3 things together are what closed it." He paused. "You didn't do that for us. You did it because someone needed help on a dark highway and because you found an envelope in the bottom of a drawer and had the sense to photograph it. The fact that it helped us is incidental to your reasons." Another pause. "It helped us, and that matters." She waited, because there was clearly a next sentence. "I want to offer you a formal acknowledgement," Turner said. "In our world, in the way we do things, when someone outside the club does something that demonstrates the kind of character that matters, we acknowledge it. Not membership, nothing that asks anything of you or changes what you are, just acknowledgement, a public one, among people who understand what it means." He paused. "There will be a gathering here in Red Creek in 2 weeks. Members from several chapters are already coming because of Durango. I would like you to be there. I would like, in front of those people, to say your name and say what you did and say that it matters to us." He looked at her steadily. "I am asking your permission to do that." She looked at him for a long time. She thought about the 14 months of customers who had asked for her father instead, about the article in the county paper asking whether Douglas Reed's daughter could keep the place running, about Billy Crane not sending referrals, about Garrett's 3 words on a piece of cardboard, who had looked at her young, blonde female, covered in grease, and made a decision before she opened her mouth. She thought about Tuesday night, about the 2.5 seconds where her foot stayed on the gas, about the chain in her hand, about 8 seconds. She thought about her father's list in the bottom drawer, 30 years of work in the walls. Mr. Turner, she said, I stopped my truck because my father told me to be the person who stops. Everything that came after the statement, the photographs, all of it came from that one decision, the decision to stop. She paused. I don't need acknowledgement for doing something I could not do. I looked at her for a moment. Something moved in his face. Genuine. No, he said, you don't need it. That's why I'm asking to give it. She understood the distinction. 2 weeks, she said. 2 weeks. He confirmed. I'll be here, she said. I'm always here. He stood up. He held out his hand. She shook it. At the door, he stopped. He didn't turn around when he said it to the door, or to the bay, or to the air. Your father built something here that outlasted him, he said. That's the rarest thing there is. Most people leave nothing. Douglas Reed left a shop that still smells like 30 years of work, and a daughter who stops when she sees someone on the ground. He paused. He knew what he was doing. He walked out. She stood in the bay for a moment. Then she went to Raymond's stool and sat on it, which she had never done before, and she put her face in her hands, and she was quiet for a long time. Not crying, not exactly. Just feeling the full weight of the last 4 days, which she had been carrying at a running pace and had not yet set down even for a moment. She felt it now, all of it. Tuesday night and the chain in 8 seconds. Whitfield and the cardboard note, Curtis and Ossie and the photographs, the call from Leah Dawson, the list in the bottom drawer, the break-in, the empty drawer, her father's handwriting on a list he kept for 6 years because he knew that someday someone would need it. She sat on Raymond's stool, and she was quiet until the weight became something she could carry differently, not less, but better distributed. The way a load that's balanced right doesn't feel lighter, but doesn't break you either. Then she stood up. She moved to the workbench. She picked up a wrench, came in at 8:15 and found her already 3 minutes into a valve adjustment on a vintage Triumph someone had dropped off the afternoon before. He read the room without asking. He poured the terrible coffee. He sat on his stool back in its right place, and drank it. Turner was here, she said. I know, Raymond said. I passed him on the road. He drives a truck. You recognized him? Recognized his face from a long time ago, Raymond said. Different road. He drank his coffee. Did he say? She told him. All of it. Briggs in custody. The operation done. The acknowledgement Turner wanted to give. Raymond was quiet through all of it. When she finished, he was quiet for another long moment. You said yes, he said. Not a question. I said I'd be here, she said. Same as always. He nodded. He set down his coffee. He picked up a wrench. They worked in silence for 20 minutes. The good kind of silence. The kind that has weight and warmth and doesn't need to be filled. Then Raymond said quietly, the first time I ever saw your father work, he was 28 years old. He had this shop and 3 tools and more confidence than any young man had a right to. He paused. Someone brought in a bike everyone else said was dead. Douglas looked at it for about 30 seconds and said the same thing you said to the man with the shovel head last Tuesday. He diagnosed it by sound from across the room. He was quiet for a moment, watched him fix it in 4 hours. I said, Douglas, how did you know? He said, I listened until it told me what it needed. Raymond paused. You do the same thing. You've always done the same thing. Not just with bikes. She kept her hands moved steadily. Proud, Raymond said. I know that word gets overused. I know people say it and don't mean it the way it actually means. I'm telling you, Douglas Reed, right now, wherever he is proud doesn't cover it. She kept working. She said, just that. Okay, the word that contains everything you don't have language for. At 11:30, her phone rang. William Dawson, she answered. Hey, Samantha. His voice was different. Not dramatically, just slightly warmer, slightly less armored. The specific quality of a man who has had a real conversation with someone he loves and is still carrying the good of it. How's Flagstaff, she said. Better than I expected, he said. A lot better. He paused. Leah told me she called you. She did, Samantha said. What did she say? She said, thank you, Samantha said. And she asked if you believed in her. What did you tell her? I thought was true, she said. I told her you felt the right things, but they got stuck. I told her I thought you were coming to Flagstaff because she mattered more than anything, and you'd finally decided to say it out loud. Silence on the line for a moment. We talked until 2 in the morning, he said. Time since I don't know, years. Another pause. I told her things I should have said a long time ago. She said things back. He was quiet. I don't know if it fixes everything. I don't think you can fix everything in one night. Started something. Starting is enough, Samantha said, is actually the hardest part. He was quiet for a moment. From Turner, about the case, about Briggs. Then you know how it ended, she said. I know how this part ended, he said, with Briggs and Garrett. A pause. The other part, what this means for you, what your name means now, in a certain world, that part's just starting. She thought about Turner, standing at the door of her bay saying things to the air, about Curtis and his 8-minute response time, about Marco at the end of her road. I know, she said. Does that bother you? He asked. She thought about it honestly. I don't know yet, she said. Ask me after the gathering. I'll be there, he said. The gathering. I'm coming back. She paused. You don't have. I know I don't have to, he said. A pause. I want to stand in a room full of people I've known for 30 years and watch them learn your name. Because I was there when it started, and I think that matters. She didn't answer for a moment. She was looking at the Triumph on the lift, at the valve she was in the middle of adjusting, at the bay that smelled like 30 years of work. Yeah, she said finally. It does. They talked for another few minutes, practical things. Ride back from Flagstaff, the Sportster's primary drive, whether the weather would hold through New Mexico. Easy things, comfortable things. The conversation of two people who have been through something together and come out on the other side into a different kind of ordinary. After she hung up, Raymond looked up from what he was working on. Lawson, he said. She was already back at the valve. He's coming to the gathering? He said he wants to watch the room learn my name, she said. Raymond was quiet. Then, I want to watch that too. She smiled. It was not a small smile. It took up her whole face for a moment, and Raymond saw it and looked back at his work like a man who has just seen something he wanted to see and is satisfied. At 2 in the afternoon, a young woman came into Iron Road with a beat-up Honda Shadow that was misfiring on the right cylinder and sounding like it was living its last days. The woman was maybe 20, nervous the way young customers are nervous, in shops like they're expecting to be overcharged or talked down to or told the problem is worse than it is. She looked at Samantha, and her expression flickered the brief recalibration of expectations that Samantha had been watching people do for 14 months. The young woman started. Samantha Reed, she said. I own the shop. Tell me what it's doing, the young woman told her. Samantha listened. She asked 2 questions. She walked around the bike once. She crouched down beside the right cylinder and put her hand near the engine casing and stayed very still for about 5 seconds. Valve timing is off, she said. Probably jumped a tooth on the cam chain. On this model at this mileage. It's fixable. Not cheap, but fixable. She stood up. You want me to look at it properly and give you a number? The young woman looked at her steadily. My boyfriend said I should take it to Cranes, she said. Said they'd know what they were doing. She paused. I looked you up before I came. Samantha looked at her. The young woman hesitated. Then I found an article from the county paper about whether you could keep the place going after your dad. A pause. And I found nothing else. Just reviews. Good one. A lot of them. She looked at the shop, then back at Samantha. I wanted to come here anyway. He said, you probably couldn't handle it. I said maybe he was wrong about that. Samantha looked at this 20-year-old woman who had driven a misfiring bike to a shop she'd chosen because she had decided to see for herself, at a boyfriend who told her what to think and had thought something different anyway. Leave the bike, Samantha said. I'll have a number for you by 4. The young woman smiled. It was a real smile, the kind that comes from being right about something. Okay, she said. She left. Samantha looked at the Shadow. She crouched down beside it and put her hand near the engine casing and listened the way her father had taught her, not with her ears only, with her whole attention, the specific focus of someone who has learned that machines tell you what they need if you give them enough quiet. It told her she got to work. Outside Red Creek was ordinary. trucks on the highway, the particular quality of a Colorado afternoon in late summer, the kind that feels like it's making a promise about something. 3 doors down, a diner that had been there longer than the garage. Across the street, the space where Garrett's truck used to park, and didn't anymore. Inside Iron Road, Samantha Reed adjusted a valve on a vintage Triumph and diagnosed a cam chain on a Honda Shadow and drank terrible coffee and moved through the work with the specific grace of someone who has spent 10,000 hours in the right place. On a shelf above the workbench, not prominently displayed but not hidden either, just there, the way important things are just there, sat the coffee mug that had been her father's, the one she'd kept, the one she'd never put away. In 2 weeks, men and women from chapters across Colorado would stand in this garage and learn the name Samantha Reed. Dawson would stand among them and watch it happen, would say words he had already chosen carefully. And Raymond would be on his stool, drinking terrible coffee, looking at something he'd been watching grow for 14 months. But that was in 2 weeks. Right now, there was a cam chain that needed replacing, and a valve that needed time, and a young woman who had driven a misfiring bike across town to prove her boyfriend wrong. Now, there was work. And Samantha Reed had never once waited for the world to be ready before she started doing it. The 2 weeks between Turner's visit and the gathering moved the way time moves when you are waiting for something significant, not slowly, not quickly, with a particular texture, each day pressing against the next with more weight than usual. Samantha did not change her routine. She opened at 8. She closed when the work was done. She made the terrible coffee. Raymond drank it without complaint. Customers came and went, some new ones, which she noticed without remarking on, because in a small town, new customers don't come from nowhere, and she understood that word was moving in ways she couldn't track directly. 3 days after Turner's visit, Roy Briggs and Garrett were formally charged. The county paper ran a front-page story. Samantha read it at the workbench with her coffee going cold beside her, and her name appeared exactly once, in a single line, as a witness whose statement had contributed to the investigation. She had expected more and was relieved there wasn't. She had no interest in being the center of a story that wasn't really about her, and read the same article at his stool. "One line," he said. "That's enough," she said. He looked at her over the paper. "Most people would want more than one line. Most people haven't thought about what more than one line actually means," she said. She picked up a wrench. "Briggs and Garrett are the story. The corridor is the story. Our Durango member who got hurt 6 months ago is the story. Who happened to be on the right road, on the right night." Folded the paper. "You know that's not true." I know that's not the whole truth," she said. "But it's true enough for a county paper." For a moment. "Whitfield's name isn't it." "Whitfield cooperated," she said. "That's how cooperation works." Raymond set the paper down. "Does that bother you?" She thought about it honestly, the way she thought about all things she wasn't sure of without rushing the answer. "A little," she said. "But less than it would have a week ago. Whitfield was a man protecting his interests. Garrett and Briggs were men hurting people. The distinction matters." She paused. "My father used to say there's a difference between someone who does wrong for money and someone who does wrong for power. Many people stop when the money situation changes. Our people don't." She started working again. "Whitfield stopped. That's worth something, even if it's not worth everything." Raymond said nothing. He just nodded in the way that means you've said something that doesn't need a response because it's already complete. On the Monday of the second week, something happened that Samantha hadn't anticipated. Billy Crane called. She saw his name on her phone and almost let it go. Not out of anger, but out of simple surprise. She had not heard from Billy Crane in 14 months, and the last interaction they'd had was him telling a mutual contact that Samantha Reed was too young and too inexperienced to be running her father's shop. She answered. "Billy," she said. "Samantha." A pause. A particular kind of pause that has a sentence behind it, struggling to get out. "I heard about what happened with the case and what you did on the highway." Another pause. "I should have sent you business after Douglas passed. I should have been. I was wrong about some things I said." She held the phone and let the silence sit for a moment, punishingly, just giving it its proper space. "Okay," she said. "That's all you're going to say?" He sounded almost surprised. "What else do you want me to say, Billy?" "I don't know." "To be angry?" she said. "I was." a while. But you not sending me work didn't stop me from doing work. It just meant I had to find it other ways. She paused. The shop is fine. The work is good. I'm still here. A long pause on his end. I've got a customer with a 68 shovel head that's beyond what I can do comfortably, he said. I was going to tell him to look somewhere else. And then I thought, send him Tuesday, she said. 8 o'clock, silence. Then that's it, she said. We're mechanics, Billy. That's what we do. He was quiet for a long moment. Father would have said the same thing. Probably, she said. He would have charged you a referral fee. I'm letting that one go. She could hear something that might have been a laugh. Cut short on his end, he said. Tuesday, 8 o'clock. She hung up. She looked at Raymond. He had been listening. Of course he had. A shop this size, there was no other option. Billy Crane, she said. I heard, Raymond said. He's sending a 68 shovelhead Tuesday morning. Raymond picked up his coffee. Well, he said, I'll make extra. She went back to work. But something had shifted in the room, small, warm, the particular shift of a thing resolving itself that you had stopped expecting to resolve. Billy Crane calling was not a grand gesture. It was not forgiveness or vindication or anything with a name. It was just a man picking up the phone because he'd been wrong and he knew it, and in some small way, he was trying to move toward right. That was enough. That was actually everything. By the Thursday before the gathering, 4 new regular customers had come through Iron Road. 2 of them referred by Curtis, who had read the county paper article and driven in from 2 towns over, and 1 who was the older brother of the young woman with the Honda Shadow, who had apparently told him that the girl mechanic at Iron Road diagnosed the problem in 30 seconds and had it fixed in 6 hours for $200 less than Billy Crane would have charged. The older brother had a 12 Fat Bob with a chronic primary chain issue, and he had driven straight to her without calling ahead. She fixed the Fat Bob in 3.5 hours. He stood beside it when she started it and listened to it run. And his face did the thing faces do when a machine that has been wrong is suddenly right. Whoever worked on this before didn't he started. Didn't replace the tensioner shoe, she said. They adjusted around it. Fix. It's a postponement. He looked at her. And you're the second person who's told me that about a different job. He stopped. William Dawson. He said it to me once about a shop in Nevada. Said those were the exact words the mechanic who fixed it right used. Kept her face exactly as it was. But something inside her went very still and very warm at the same time. Advice regardless of the source, she said. Yeah, the man said. He looked at her for a moment longer than was ordinary, like he was checking something. He talks about you, you know. When he came back through, he stopped at my place in Pueblo. Told me about the shop, about what you did, he paused. I told my chapter. She looked at him properly for the first time. Not the customer look, the full attention look. Your Pueblo chapter. Pueblo chapter, he confirmed. He held out his hand. She shook it, Samantha Reed. Yeah, he said. I know who you are. That sentence, those 5 words said plainly, without drama hit her somewhere she hadn't expected. Not because of its weight, but because of its simplicity. I know who you are. Not who your father was. Not whether you were capable. I know who you are. She charged him fair for the Fat Bob. He paid without discussion. He rode out and she stood in the doorway of the bay and watched him go. And for a moment, just a moment, she let herself feel the full shape of what was true. The gathering was on a Saturday. She did not know exactly how many people were coming until Friday afternoon when Curtis stopped by and told her 43 riders had confirmed and 17 more were likely. 60 people, possibly, all of them connected in various ways to the world that had arrived in her Bay One conversation at a time over the past 2 weeks. She had not expected 60. Is that a problem? Curtis said. She said. And then, honestly, I don't know what I expected. Moves fast in certain circles, he said. It was the same thing he had said the first day he came. She remembered. What happened on Highway 62, it's a specific kind of story. It doesn't need embellishment. The plain version is already everything. The plain version, she said. He looked at her steadily. A 24-year-old mechanic saw a man down and got out of her truck. She put 5 men on the ground in 8 seconds with a tool from her repair bag. She fixed the man's bike in 4 hours and charged him fair. And then, over the next 2 weeks, she gave a witness statement, provided evidence her father had kept for 6 years and never once changed her routine or closed the shop, or acted like any of it was more than what it was the right thing done without ceremony. He paused. That's the plain version. She looked at the floor for a moment. It sounds bigger than it felt. That's always how it works, Curtis said. The things that are actually big usually feel like ordinary decisions in the moment. That's what makes them big. If it felt like a grand gesture, you'd have made a different choice. She thought about 2.5 seconds on the gas pedal, about the chain in her repair bag, about 8 seconds. She said, 60 people. Probably 60, he said. Raymond's going to need more coffee. She laughed. It came out surprised, which was the best kind of laugh. Raymond's coffee is terrible, she said. Yeah, Curtis said, but they'll drink it anyway, because that's what you do in a place like this. Saturday morning came in quietly. She was in the shop by 7, which was an hour before she needed to be, because she needed the hour of ordinary before the day became something else. She just sat with the lights on, and the smell of oil and metal and 30 years of work in the walls, and she drank her father's coffee from her father's mug and let it be what it was. Arrived at 7:30, an hour and a half early, which was not a thing he ever did. She looked at him when he came in. Don't say anything, he said. He hung his jacket on the hook by the door, the hook he always used. He sat on a stool. He poured coffee. Just don't. She didn't say anything. She gave him his silence, and he gave her hers, and they sat together in the bay with the good kind of quiet between them until the first bikes started arriving at 9. They came in ones and twos and then in groups. She heard them before she saw them. The particular sound of multiple engines that are not in formation but are moving in the same direction and at the same pace. Coffee was the sound of people who know each other well enough to arrive together without coordinating. She came to the door of the bay and stood there. Dax was early from Pueblo, and Marco and Shep arrived together. 3 riders she didn't know came right behind them, and then 4 more, and then a group of 7, and the lot filled in the way lots fill when something real is happening, not rushed, not performative, just steady and certain. She stood in the doorway and watched them come. At 9:47, a cherry red Sportster turned into the lot, and she knew it before she saw it because she knew the engine by sound. She had fixed that engine. She had replaced the bearing and the chain, and heard it run right for the first time in months. And the sound of it now was the sound of something she had made right. William Dawson parked the Sportster. He got off it the way he always got off it, deliberately, the way a man gets off a horse, acknowledging the machine. He looked across the lot at her. She looked back. He walked over. He stopped in front of her, and he looked at her for a long moment, the look of a man taking inventory, not of a situation, but of a person, checking what he sees against what he knows. You look exactly the same, he said. It's been 2 weeks, she said. 2 weeks can change everything, he said, or nothing. Depends on the person. She looked at him. He looked different than he had on Highway 62, not in his face, not his body, but in some quality of presence. Like something that had been pulled tight in him had been given enough room to relax. Flagstaff was good, she said. Flagstaff was necessary, he said. Good is maybe still in progress. He almost smiled. Leah says to say thank you. She already thanked me. She wanted to say it again, he said. Through me, which is her way of making me practice. He paused, saying the right thing to the right person. She said I needed to practice. Samantha said, I know. He said, she usually is. He looked past her into the bay. Workbench and the tools and the lift and Raymond's stool. Father's place, he said quietly. My place, she said, not correcting him, just completing it. He looked at her. He said, your place. Michael Turner arrived at 10:15. He came the way he had come before, alone, by truck without ceremony. He shook hands with people as he crossed the lot, the practiced ease of a man who has been moving through rooms his whole life. He came to Samantha last. He shook her hand and held it for a moment. He said, she thought about what she was ready for. Not the acknowledgement that was straightforward. That was a room full of people, and words said plainly. She was ready for that. What she was thinking about was everything else that came after. The new customers, the referrals, the young woman with the Honda Shadow who had decided for herself, Billy Crane calling on a Monday morning. The way a story moves through certain circles and changes the shape of things. She was thinking about what it meant to be known in a new way. Not known as Douglas Reed's daughter. Not known as the girl mechanic they laughed at. Known as Samantha Reed, who got out of her truck on a dark highway because she couldn't not. Yes, she said, I'm ready. Turner moved to the center of the lot. He didn't call for attention. He simply stopped moving. And attention came to him the way attention comes to people who have earned it through years of being worth listening to. 61 people, she had counted without meaning to, went quiet. Most of you know why we're here, Turner said. His voice carried without effort. Rango's situation is resolved. Briggs and Garrett and 6 members of their operation are in custody. The corridor is clean. That took 7 months, and it took 3 things coming together at the right moment. He paused. A deputy named Karen Ossie, who kept pulling the thread when it would have been easier to let it go. A list kept for 6 years by a mechanic named Douglas Reed, who understood that the truth needs to be written down to survive. Another pause. And a 24-year-old woman who stopped her truck on Highway 62 on a Tuesday night because someone was on the ground and she could not stop. The lot was completely quiet. The 61 people who had come from across Colorado stood in the lot of a small motorcycle repair shop outside Red Creek and listened. I've been riding for 31 years, Turner said. In that time, I have met maybe a dozen people who do the right thing without asking whether it's convenient, because they're fearless, because they've decided that some things matter more than being comfortable. He looked at Samantha. I'd like to say the name of one of those people out loud in front of the people who are here, because that's what we do when we recognize what deserves to be recognized. He paused. Samantha Reed. Nobody cheered, nobody clapped. It was not that kind of moment. What happened instead was quieter and truer. 61 people looked at her. 61 people who had written from different towns in different chapters for different reasons, who were connected by a thread of shared values that was older than any of them, looked at a 24-year-old mechanic with grease still in the creases of her hands, and they looked at her with the specific regard of people who know what a thing is worth. She did not look away. She looked back. She let it be what it was. Turner reached inside his cut. He brought out a patch, not a membership patch. Something smaller, something she didn't recognize. He held it out to her. You don't have to wear it, he said. You don't have to do anything with it. It's not an obligation or an invitation. It's just a way of saying that this room knows your name and knows why. She took it. She held it in her palm and looked at it. A small emblem, a wrench crossed with a road. Simple, direct. She looked up at Turner. My father kept a list for 6 years, she said, and her voice was steady in the way things are steady when they come from somewhere deep and sure. He didn't know what it would matter for. He kept it because he believed that truth needs somewhere to live until it's needed. She looked at the patch in her hand, then back at the 61 people in her lot. I stopped my truck 2 weeks ago because my father taught me that some decisions aren't actually decisions. They're just the moment when you find out who you already are. She paused. I found out who I am. I found out who he was. And I found out that what someone builds in 30 years of honest work doesn't end when they do. She looked at Raymond on his stool in the doorway of the bay, holding his terrible coffee with both hands. It keeps going, as long as someone keeps doing the work. Looked at his coffee cup. He did not look up. She saw his hands tighten around it, and she knew what that meant. And she did not look away from him until he was ready. He looked up. His eyes were dry and his face was still, and he nodded once, the particular nod of a man who has just received the thing he has been waiting to receive for 14 months. After Turner finished and the formal part of the morning gave way to the ordinary part, people talking, coffee consumed despite its quality, particular ease of a crowd that has come to a place for a real reason, William Dawson came to stand beside her. They stood together in the doorway of the bay and watched the lot. 61 people who had not been here 2 weeks ago and were here now because of a Tuesday night on a dark highway. What are you thinking, he said. She thought about it honestly. She thought about her father at the kitchen table at 3 a.m. after something that mattered. She thought about the way he had to bikes, to people, to the particular sound of things telling you what they needed if you gave them enough quiet. I'm thinking that this is good, she said. And I'm thinking that tomorrow morning it goes back to being a motorcycle shop. And that's also good. That's actually the best part. William looked at her. Most people would want to hold on to this a little longer. I'm not most people, she said. And this, she gestured at the lot, the bikes, the 61 people, isn't something you hold on to. It's something that happened because of work. The way to honor it is to go back to the work for a moment. Then, the Sportster's running perfectly, by the way. I know, she said. I fixed it right. He almost laughed. Yeah, he said. You did. They stood there together, For another minute, two people who had met on a dark highway when one of them was on the ground, and the other had 2.5 seconds to make a decision that changed everything. And now they were standing in the doorway of a motorcycle shop in Colorado on a Saturday morning with the sun on the lot, and 61 people drinking terrible coffee, and the ordinary beauty of it was so complete that neither of them felt the need to say anything else. The patch stayed in her pocket that day and the next, and the one after. She didn't frame it or display it. She didn't put it anywhere obvious. She put it in the drawer of her horse desk, the same drawer where her father's list had been, the one that had been empty for 2 weeks, and she left it there. That's where important things live. Not on display. In the place you go when you need to remember something true. The months that followed were not dramatic. They were better than dramatic. Iron Road grew the way real things grow steadily. Without announcement, one repaired bike at a time, the new customers kept coming. The referrals from Curtis's network became a regular thread. Billy Crane's 68 shovelhead customer came back twice, and then sent his brother, and then his brother's riding group started showing up, not many at first, 2 or 3, then more. Some of them wanted their bikes fixed. Some of them, she realized, wanted something else. They wanted to stand in a place where a woman had done the work and been taken seriously for it, and they wanted to see what that looked like up close. She did not give speeches. She did not hold workshops or post inspirational content. She simply fixed bikes in front of them with the same focus she always had, and answered their questions plainly and charged them fair. One of them, 19 years old, quiet, with a vintage Yamaha she'd rebuilt herself from parts she'd found online, asked her once, "How do you get people to take you seriously?" Samantha looked up from the job she was doing. She thought about the question. She thought about it the way she thought about all real questions, without rushing the answer, without giving the easy version. You do the work until the work is undeniable, she said, and you don't waste energy on people who aren't ready to see it yet. They'll either come around or they won't, and that's their problem, not yours. She paused. You don't need everyone to take you seriously. You need enough. Thought about that. How do you know when you have enough? Samantha looked at the Yamaha. The girl had rebuilt herself from parts found online. She looked at the quality of the work, the care in it, the patience, the evidence of someone who had sat with something hard until it became something right. When you stop counting, she said, that's when you know, and heard that exchange. He didn't say anything about it. He just made his terrible coffee and sat on his stool and worked. And later, when the shop was closed and quiet, and they were the only ones there, he said, your father used to say exactly that. She said. Almost word for word, Raymond said. 1989. I asked him something similar. 26. I was 30-something. He paused. You stopped counting about 2 weeks ago. I watched it happen. She didn't say anything for a moment. Then, was I still counting before that? A little, Raymond said. Just a little. Just enough to know you hadn't stopped yet. He picked up his coffee. Now you have. She thought about that. She thought about the weight she'd been carrying since the day she inherited the shop, not just the debt and the empty bays and the customers who went to Crane's instead, but the internal weight of needing to prove something, the low-level constant hum of not quite being sure yet, not quite certain enough. It was quiet. She put her hand on the worn center of the sawhorse desk, felt the smooth wood under her palm. 30 years of elbows and paperwork and coffee cups and the weight of honest work. She was 24 years old. She had inherited a shop and a debt and a list in the bottom drawer, and a father's belief that the right thing was the right thing regardless of the cost. She had driven past an abandoned gas station on a Tuesday night and made a decision in 2.5 seconds that she had been building toward her entire life. She had held a chain in her hand and used it the way her father had taught her to use everything, not as force but as understanding applied at the right angle. She had not become a legend because she defeated 6 men. She had not become known because she was loud or demanding or impossible to ignore. She had become what she was. Because when the moment came, when it was dark, and she was tired, and she had every reason to keep driving, she stopped. That was the whole of it. And the whole of it was everything. Iron Road Motorcycle Garage opened at 8 o'clock the next morning, and the morning after that, and the morning after that. Samantha Reed was always already there when the light came up, already at the workbench, already listening to whatever the first machine of the day needed to tell her. The work didn't stop. It never stopped. That was the point of it. That was what it meant to build something that outlasted the moment it started in. You just kept working, and the work kept being what it was, earned. And the world either caught up to you or it didn't. And either way, you were still there with your tools in your hands and your father's words and the particular stubbornness of someone who had been told to sit her whole life and simply did not have the habit. She was Samantha Reed. She owned Iron Road, and she was always, always open.